All right. Let's share the screen. Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to our first training session for cohort 26. Actually, I guess you could say it's the second one because we had one earlier today, but it was all the same information that we're about to talk about now. We're trying to repeat the sessions when we can, if time permits with our schedule here at the ALSDE. So if you were at this morning's session, you're welcome to stay, but you don't have to because you have already heard all of this information once. But of course, people ask questions and things like that. Things might pop up where we talk about something that we did not talk about this morning. That is a possibility. But we're going to try to cover the same basic information. But I want to start by just saying welcome and congratulations on getting the 21st Century grant for your schools or site. This competition was extremely competitive, probably as far as what I've been told, probably the most competitive competition that we've had in Alabama's 21st Century program ever. We had quite a few people apply for the grant, and I think it came out to be where only about half of the applicants that qualified actually got the grant, and I don't think that's usually been the case in the past, but so kudos to you guys for doing an excellent job on writing your RFAs, writing your applications, and adhering to the regulations and guidelines. And welcome to 21st Century. Some of you have been with 21st Century before, and some of you are new to 21st Century, or maybe it's been several years since you've had a 21st Century grant at your school. So, for those of you who are new, welcome to you. And for those of you who currently have a grant, some of you are currently getting 21st Century funds through Cohort 16 and managed to get the grant again. And so congratulations to you guys. Congratulations to you guys as well. While I introduce myself, I am going to put up on the screen a QR code for you to use to sign in to today's session. So if you will use your phone to scan this QR code, I'm also going to put the QR code in the chat. I can access it really quickly so that those of you who may be on your phone or who may be on your phone and can't scan something right now can use this link instead. So I am putting it in the chat now. And if you are calling in and you're just listening and you don't have access to either this QR code or the link, please feel free to email us at the State Department and we can make sure we send you that link and just, explain to us what happened or why you weren't able to sign in that way. We understand that does happen sometimes. But I think most people, I didn't see too many calling in, so hopefully everybody is able to get into the session and listen. My name is Amanda Ryland. I am the 21st Century State Coordinator. I'm also an administrator with federal programs here at the Alabama State Department of Education. I've been with federal programs for, I think, 5 years now, and I became the administrator over 21st Century about a year ago. So this is around this time last year. I think getting the position was announced at Mega last year. So it was around this time last year that I found out I had this position. So it has been a whirlwind of a year. And for those of you who were in on the Cohort 26 RFA meetings and getting ready for the grant, you guys know that I have been, you've heard me talk about all the things that I've been learning and of course, mistakes that have been made and things like that. But that's just kind of the way things go as you're learning something new. We're super excited to have you here, and this is my first new cohort training. other than we did do some training for Cohort 25 summer. We called it, back when you guys were applying for the grant, we called it Cohort 26 also, but we ended up having to change the name because we actually started their funding in 2025 instead of 26. And so we changed the name of that grant to Cohort 25 Summer. And we did a training for them separately because their program, of course, started this summer and they needed training earlier than you guys did. So other than, and we actually went to them, it was just Blount County was the only county that got that grant. And so we just kind of gave them their own private training. So other than that, this is my first time. This morning, we didn't get quite through as much as I thought we would, but I do tend to ramble sometimes. So I'll try to hold back on that, but I try to give you really good information and things that will apply to you into the grant. So we'll see how far we get today, and then we'll pick up where we left off at the next meeting, which I believe is next Monday. So I'm going to go ahead and go past the slide. If you haven't scanned this yet and need to sign in, please go ahead and do so, because it does provide a timestamp to us as to when you signed into the meeting. So that we know that you guys were here for the entire thing. If you need it after I have gotten off of this slide, then you are welcome to just use the link that's in the chat. And then if I see a whole bunch of more, a lot more people will come in a little bit later, I will show it again in a little while to give them a chance to scan in and sign in as well. Okay, so let me go over our 21st century team. And by the way, the reason why I'm showing you my screen this way is if I try to share it like an actual presentation, it goes crazy. It shows one on one screen and one on another, and then I can't see you guys. I can't read the chat. So that's why I'm showing it to you this way. So please forgive any grammatical errors that are highlighted or anything like that, but that might pop up. But this is just the easiest way to do it and navigate showing you my screen in WebEx. So anyway, all right, so I've already introduced myself. This first grouping of team members with 21st Century they all work for the Alabama State Department of Education. We have Dr. Kelly Smith, who is a 21st Century Federal Program Specialist. We have Carla White and Dr. Melissa McKinney, who are also both 21st Century Federal Programs Specialists. Some of you may be wondering about Alicia Alves, who has been with the program up until this past Friday. And unfortunately, she sent out an email, I think on either Thursday or Friday of last week, but in case you didn't get that, unfortunately, Alicia is no longer working with federal programs. She has moved to another section here at the State Department of Education, where she's being given some more opportunities to grow in her career. And so we're super excited for her, even though we're kind of low-key hoping it doesn't work out for her and she wants to come back, because she was a huge asset to us, especially to me as I was learning the program. She had the most experience out of all of us and was just a wealth of knowledge and just had a wonderful and kind spirit, and we're going to miss her tremendously. But we do have a great team. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hire anybody to replace Alicia, but we do still have Kelly and Carla, who have been with the program about the same amount of time as I have, maybe a little bit later than me, but not by much. And Dr. Melissa McKinney, who has been with us just for a couple of months now, but she's a super fast learner, very helpful. She's going to be taking over for a lot of Alicia's sites. And so you guys will be meeting her if you haven't done so already. Another new name to share with you is Nia Marshall. She is my new administrative assistant and will be helping out with 21st Century as well. You may get emails from her. She's going to kind of help me with, files and things like that, keeping up with compliance and issues like that. So if you get an email from Nia, that's who that is. She is going to be a tremendous help to us in our program and keeping up with kind of our documentation and things like that. Then we have 3 technical assistants who are all retired state employees that work part-time with our program, and they're the boots on the ground. They're the ones that will come out and work with you at your site. They also help us with compliance monitoring and, just checking on that you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing for one thing, but also they're there to provide you with coaching and assistance in any way that you need it. So they're there to help you more than anything. Their names are Joseph Dyer, Kim Hendon, and Adrian Dennis. Now we haven't talked to them. I think I spelled Adrian's name wrong. I just realized that. I apologize. Let me fix that really quick. No, that doesn't look right either. Anyway, I'll fix that later. But Adrian, I think she's in on this call. But anyway, they are, Adrian's fairly new to the program, but Joe and Kim have been with us for at least a year, longer than that, I believe. And they are a very valuable part of our team. And then 21st Century ALSDE also has a partnership with the Truman Pierce Institute, which is a part of Auburn University. And they also help us kind of administer the grant. They help us with a lot of things that have to do with data collection. They're kind of our go-to when it comes to easy reports, collecting data. They also help us with compliance and things like that. They help us collect things. You've probably gotten emails from Erica. She sends out a weekly email for us with just kind of updates and just all kinds of wealth of knowledge for you guys to get each week. But let me kind of walk through who this staff is. This is the second group of names on this list. So the first is Dr. Jason Bryant. He is the director of Truman Pierce Institute at Auburn. You'll see him in some trainings and ACEA and things and Mega and things like that. But a lot of times you'll mainly see Erica and the two Lindas. Erica is the 21st Century Program Director for TPI. And again, she sends out those weekly emails and she's your go-to if you have questions about any kind of data collection. Also your external evaluators. She does a lot for us with external evaluators and, they just help us out with a variety of different things at the State Department. So you can always reach out to her or her team, which is our two Lindas, Linda Dean and Linda Williams. They are also incredible. Help with collecting our data, making sure that you guys are in compliance with the grant, that you're reporting the things that you're supposed to be reporting. If you have problems with easy reports, they will help you, set up your program. There's just they are a wealth of knowledge and very, very helpful. So they also help with like compliance. So if they see that something's not turned in on time, they may email you for that, things like that. So you could potentially get emails from them as well. And if you have questions, you can reach out to them in addition to us. Then they also have 3 technical assistants that are hired through TPI. So those 3 are Ellen Martin, Dr. Sarah Richardson. So Sarah just got her doctorate. Congratulations to her. And Christy Marvel. You guys that have been in the program before probably know Ellen and Sarah. You may or may not have met Christy yet. She's fairly new to the program, but they serve in the same capacity right now as Joe, Kim, and Adrian. They serve as technical assistants. And again, they come out and help with various aspects of the program, but they're really the ones that are going to come out to your sites the most frequently and can provide you with some help if you need it, one-on-one kind of in-person help. We're considering right now potentially putting those 6 technical assistants in teams where you would actually have 2 and one would more serve in a TA capacity as far as making sure that you're compliant with the grant. So they would serve more to help us with compliance monitoring or coming out and checking your inventory and things like that. And we may make one of the other person on the team more of your coach. They would come out and help with things like lesson planning and communication between the site and the school, more of a coach thing. Now that's new. That's something that's still being thought through and developed. So it may not happen this year, or it may start to happen this year. I think this is something we're going to kind of slowly approach. And it may not work out. It may be better for us to just keep everything the way it is. But I am all for trying new things. if we feel like it can be beneficial to everyone. I don't want you guys to look at the technical assistants as the gotcha people. I really want you to think of them more as your helpers, as the people you can go to one-on-one and ask questions and get help. But we do ask them to serve in that compliance role sometimes. And so that's why I'm kind of thinking about separating the two. Not to say that even when they do serve as more of a technical assistant role, that they would be that gotcha kind of person either. We don't have that. We try not to have that attitude in any kind of way. Our entire team wants to try our best to be helpful as much as possible. And we want you guys to be successful in this program. We want all 21st century programs to be successful. And so our goal is to not catch you doing anything wrong. Our goal is to stop you from doing something wrong before you get in trouble for it. If we see things that potentially aren't being done the right way, we want to address it as fast as possible so that we don't have any kind of problems. We don't have anybody getting in trouble, and we don't end up having any findings or anything like that for either you guys or us. So that's the way all of us try to approach everything. Then of course there's those times when we have to be a little more forward in making sure things are done the right way. So that does happen sometimes too. But we try to nip things in the bud before they become a problem, and do it in a way that is being helpful to you guys and not we caught you doing something wrong, you're bad, blah, blah, blah. She going to be like that. We're going to try not to be that way in any kind of way. The other person on this list is Dr. Shannon Dadd. She is the lead of our state external evaluation. I think she actually has a team. I'm not sure the names of the other people on her team, so that's why I didn't put them on there. But just like how you guys are told in the grant that you have to hire an external evaluator, we have to do the same thing as well. The whole State Department, the entire 21st century program also has to be evaluated as a whole. And so we have a contract with Troy University to do that for us. And Dr. Shannon Dadd leads that team as our evaluators. So you might hear from her at some certain times of the year. Actually, around this time of the year is, for those of you who are already 21st century, you might have started getting some contact from Shannon and asking you to do things like fill out surveys or give your students surveys or whatever, things that are going to help her with our overall state program evaluation. So you might hear from her sometimes as well. Okay, so today's agenda, this is not exactly fully updated or in the right order. I meant to update this. I took basically the presentation from our training with Cohort 25 and adapted it some in different ways to make it follow the RFA. So, and I forgot to go back and update this, and I wasn't sure how far we would get today, so please ignore this, but I can tell you that today we'll definitely, actually all of these meetings, we will be touching on items that are in the RFA so that we make sure that everybody understands what it is that they are and are not supposed to be doing with 21st century. I don't think we're going to get to job descriptions today or fingerprinted background checks, but we might touch on the PARs, some fiscal matters. But we're basically, a lot of what today is going to be is talking about federal rules and regulations and guidance. But before I start on that, I do want to verbally explain something about you guys' funding. I sent out an email last week, I believe. It might have been the week before. I can't remember. All the days have started. They just all kind of blend together. But I sent all the new 21st century Cohort 26 program directors that I knew of. I sent an email to them explaining some things that I thought that you needed to know as quickly as possible about the grant, because some of it are things that you're going to have to start putting together, like getting your job descriptions together for those who did not do that already. And I wanted to let you know about the whole background check situation. And I also explained what's going on with the funding, but I want to verbally explain it as well, just in case I did not do a good job in putting it in writing. You know how sometimes when you write out something, it makes sense to you, but it might not make sense to other people. I try to be really careful about that, but still, I just want to verbally explain what's going on with giving you access to your funds as early as July 1st. So just to give you some background information on that, when the RFA was actually written and was actually approved by the State Department, at that time we had a different chief financial officer here at the State Department. We had Dr. Brandon Payne that was working with us, and he was on board with changing our state's fiscal year to match the federal fiscal year. So in case you didn't know this, the federal fiscal year is actually 18 months instead of 12 months like ours is. They actually begin their fiscal year on July 1st, and it goes through July 1st of the next year to September 30th of the next year. So it's actually 18 months long. In every other state in the United States, except for one and us and one other state, follows the same 18-month fiscal year as the federal government. And they do this so that they can give their schools access to the funds earlier than October 1st. Our fiscal year in Alabama it runs from October 1st to September 30th of each year. Problem with our fiscal year again is that we don't give our sites access to federal funding until 2 months into the school year, 2 or 3 months into the school year, which could cause some problems, especially for programs like 21st Century. And so we were super excited that Dr. Payne was willing to take the steps, the measures to align us with the federal fiscal year. But unfortunately, he left. I'm not sure if he retired or went somewhere else. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we got a new chief financial officer, which is Arthur Watts. And of course, with him coming in, I think he came from Montgomery Public Schools, and being in this role as a new chief financial officer, he was hesitant to make a major change like that, just fresh coming into the program. And I don't blame him for feeling that way. That's a huge change that requires a lot of different parts, a lot of it requires changing in accounting systems in some cases for both the state and the LEAs. It's a major change. And so I don't blame him for not wanting to make that major change his first year in this position. And he's considering it for the future, but we'll see how that goes. But it put us in a bind because, as you know, it says in our RFA that you would have access, that you could request to have access to funds as early as July 1st when the funds drop from the federal government. So this put us in an issue because technically the way the EGAP system and the accounting system is set up is that we can't give, if you fill out your EGAP application in 2026, which is what you guys did, there's not a way to reimburse you for funds from 2025, or prior, or just another way to say that, prior to October 1st. So I've been going back and forth with accounting, trying to figure out a resolution to this problem, because Dr. Killingsworth and I were both adamant that we told you guys that we wanted you to come to Mega, which is in July. We needed to be able to reimburse you for that. We told you that you needed to be able to start your programs on the first day of school, which by the way is a federal requirement of the grant. And so we knew we needed to figure out a way to fix this. So the only thing that we could come up with that both we could agree to and accounting could agree to is what I'm about to go over with you. So first of all, you're kind of in two different categories. About half of you currently have a Cohort 16 grant that's about to expire. That grant will take you guys, if that's you, if you have a Cohort 16 grant, your funding, you've already got funding right now, and it doesn't go away until September 30th. And so you can either continue to use the funds that you already have to support your program until September 30th. Or if you need additional funds, if you need to request additional funds to help you get through the first couple of months of the new year, we can provide that for you as a supplemental grant. We can add some funding to your grant. Got plenty of extra funds that need to be spent. And so in that email I sent you a couple of weeks ago, there was a link in there that I asked everybody, all cohort 16 people, and thank you. I think Carla is putting it in the chat right now. So if you haven't clicked on this link and filled this form out yet, you don't have to do it today, but I would like for you to do it by Friday. That was the deadline that was asked. But I need you to go in and fill that form out and let me know. And I'm talking right now to the cohort 16 people. Let me know if you need additional funds added to your cohort 16 grant to get you through until September 30th. So, and most of you are probably fine, but some of you may not have been thinking about, you might have been thinking that you would that this program would end at the end of the summer or something. You might not have been thinking about budgeting or preparing for the beginning of next year. And so you might need some additional funds, and you can fill that form out to request those additional funds, and I will add that to your current grant. Then there's the other half of you who don't currently have a 21st century grant for your site. And you might need funds to help you get through the first couple of months of the grant. So here's how it's going to work for you. And let me just apologize up front, because it is going to be more work on you, and it's going to be more work on us as well. But it's the only solution that we could come up with to help you, to give you access to the funds that you need. You don't have to do it. If your program has plenty of money from another source to get you through until September 30th, and you don't need any reimbursement for anything before then, you don't have to do this, what I'm about to tell you. But if you do want to spend funds starting July 1st up through September 30th, and you want to be reimbursed for those expenses with 21st century funds, then this is what you're going to have to do. So what we're having to do at the state level is we're having an additional application built in EGAP. It's something new. It's going to be a very simple application, and we're going to call it a Cohort 26 pre-cost award application. It's going to be in 2025, though. I know just to remind you, when you first log into EGAP, you guys have been having to change the year to 26 to get to your EGAP application, to 2026. Well, this will be under 2025. This is the only way we can give you access to 2025 funds, which can be spent between July 1st and September 30th. So it's going to be a very simple application. We've told the people that work with us to build our EGAP things that we just basically wanted to have a place for you to put your site name, your subgrantee name, your site name, just your basic common information, and then a budget sheet. And that's all it's going to have in it, because we don't need you to do all that other stuff. You've already done it under your Cohort 26 application. There's no reason for you to do answer all those questions again that were in the original grant. We just need a place for you to be able to budget some funds and for you to be able to be reimbursed through the EGAP system that way. So this same link that's in the chat was also sent last week. We also need you to click on it as well. We need you guys, if you want to take advantage of this, we need you to think about how much money you would need to get you through, how much money you're going to need to get you through September 3rd, but your costs between July 1st and September 30th. So this would be the funding it's going to take for you to pay for those of you who are coming to Mega. It could be any other maybe professional development that you do between now and September 30th with your staff. It could be to pay your staff for the first 2 months of school for August and September. It could be for materials and supplies that you need to purchase for your after school programming to get you guys started, any of that. So we need you to sit down and think about how much money you need to get you through those first couple of months. And then once you've determined that, you're going to go to this link. Again, I sent it to you in an email, and I'll make sure that that gets sent to you again sometime this week or probably today. And we asked for you to do this by Friday. If you're not ready, just let me know and I can give you some more time, because it's going to take some time to build the application in EGAP anyway. But I just kind of wanted to know, as far as in advance as possible, how much money you guys are going to need. But go in and fill this form out and tell me how much funds you would like allocated to you in this FY25 application. Once it's built in EGAP, we've been told by the EGAP people, IT people, that they'll have it to us by September. I'm hoping it'll be faster than that. To me, in my brain, it should just be an easy copy, make a copy of what's already there. I don't think it really should take that long, but I'm not an IT expert. But they've told us they'll have it to us by September, hopefully earlier than that. And then once you tell us how much money you want, we will take that money out of your 2026 allocation and put it into 2025, into this application. Once we've done that, we will let you know, and we'll need you to go in and budget those funds. So basically, just tell us what you're spending, go in and put your function codes and your object codes of how you plan to spend these funds over this between July 1st and September 30th. Now, for you guys, if you don't spend all of it, it will roll over into your FY26 application for what is not spent. So that's another unfortunate problem this is going to create, is you will have to do a closeout at the end of September. Once you'll have to go through the FER process at the end of September. I don't think that process is very difficult, but you'll have to go through that, close out the FY25 funds, which will then, whatever you didn't spend, will roll back over into your FY26 grant. And then we'll go from there for the rest of the year. And you won't have to do this again next year. You shouldn't have to do it again for any other part of this grant. It's just this first year only, so that you guys could get started. Again, I will let you guys know as soon as that simple application is built in EGAP. And we just ask you, to think through how much money you're going to need. Think about how it needs to be written in your budget, which I do plan to go over some EGAP stuff. Hopefully on Monday session, we can work that in so you guys know what we expect in your narratives for EGAP for those of you who are new. Just be prepared to do that. So again, it's optional. You don't have to do this, but this is the only way we'll be able to reimburse you for any expenses before that you get prior to October 1st. If you need some reimbursement for some funds. So if you have any questions about that, just let me know. You're always welcome to put in a question in the chat. I've got you all muted right now because this is being recorded, and sometimes people tend to unmute themselves and say crazy things. And so I've got everybody muted, but if you do have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. And if not, then we're just going to go ahead and start talking about the new RFA. And we're just going to kind of work ourselves through it. Now, some of you have heard all this information before because you actually helped write your grant. And some of you have never probably even looked at the RFA. And so I'm going to go through these things as though you've never seen it before, because all of you as program directors and site coordinators and financial people, all of you need to know all the aspects of the RFA so that you are making sure that you're being compliant with the grant. One thing about the 21st Century Program is because it is a competitive grant, we do have to monitor it much more closely than we tend to monitor other federal funding programs. And so it does have a lot involved with it. There's a lot of expectations that are federally mandated, things that we have to do. There's some things that we ask you to do that aren't federally mandated, but it's to make our jobs easier or to make things more fair and consistent. One of the things that I'm trying my best to do, so far I haven't done a great job of it, just because I'm still learning. I'm trying to cut out things that aren't necessary. If I see that we're asking you to do things that are repetitive or aren't really a necessary aspect of the grant, I'm trying to cut things like that out. But of course, in my first year in this position, I didn't want to cut things out and then find out later, well, that's why we were asking them to do that. You know, I didn't want to do that kind of thing. But now that I'm going into my second year, I'm looking for more ways to try to make things easier on you guys so that this grant, so that you can enjoy the grant and it's not a huge burden on you guys. But there are, you know, there's some things I can't cut out because they are requirements. I will make sure that you guys get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation so that you can click on these links that are built into it. It'll probably be sent out with Erica's email on Friday. But this is a link to the RFA. If you've not read it before, I highly recommend that you go and read it, download it, and go through it. All right, just to give you some background on the awards for this program. This is a 5-year competitive grant. So in the past, I think the grants have always been 3 years, but I'll just be honest with you. I felt like it would be easier on everyone if we did the grant every 5 years, because running a new grant competition every few years is extremely time consuming and there's a lot built into it. And so when I found out that we could go anywhere from 3 to 5 years, I decided to change it to 5 years. Now, it may not work out. We may end up having to run another, well, we are going to run another competition for Cohort. It's probably going to be called Cohort 27, which will come out very soon. But then after that, it would be great if we didn't have to run another grant, you know, for 4 or 5 years. There's good things to that and bad things to that. You being able, knowing that you have the funding for 5 years enables people to build their programs out a little bit better, really develop them, and really get a well-rounded 21st century program. But then on the flip side of that, if you don't get the grant, you know, you have to wait longer before you can get it again, before you can apply for it again. So we're just going to kind of see how it goes. But that's the plan. Well, you guys definitely have it for 5 years. But we'll see if we continue that 5-year grant and for future awards. Out of the people who got the grant, we had 22 LEAs or CBOs that were awarded the grant. 8 of those are new. And when I say new, I mean they don't currently have a 21st century grant. They may have had one years ago before my time, but they don't currently have one right now, other than the one they just got. And that would be Butler County, Choctaw County, Elmore County, Eufaula City, Girls Inc., Oxford City, Pike County, and Winston County. So congratulations to you guys for getting the grant, and welcome to 21st Century. And then the other 14 of you, of the subgrantees, currently either have a Cohort 16 or 17 grant at least one site. So welcome back to those of you who fall into that category. Out of those 22 subgrantees, there's 41 sites. So some subgrantees only have one site, some grantees have multiple sites. But it totals out to being 41 sites. 22 of those sites are new, and 19 currently have a Cohort 16 grant. So about half, a little over half are brand new. At least the site is new. It may be some of the ones that say new, their LEA may currently have a grant at another school or at another site, but this particular site that got the grant this time is new to having 21st Century. And then of course 19 currently have the grant now, and will continue to have it for the next 5 years. And then the grant amounts ranged from $142,498 to $436,050. Our cap, our maximum amount you could apply for this time, if you include the transportation allocation that could be added, would have been $520,000. We did have a couple of sites that applied for that amount, but they didn't actually score high enough to get the grant. So our largest grant amount ended up being a little over $400,000. And you'll get these funds every year for the next 5 years if you do everything you're supposed to do. So let's talk about what you're supposed to do. So some of the site coordinators may or may not know about this. Your program directors hopefully do, but this year's grant was based off of a funding formula. We've never done this in Alabama before. I think for the past couple of grants, we just had a maximum amount, and the site could ask for how much they wanted. So most people, I think, asked for like I think the cap was 200,000, and a lot of people got 200,000. There were some that got less than that, but it wasn't based off of any particular formula or anything. And to me, that didn't seem fair when I was looking at the EGAP applications and going through people's budgets, because there were some sites who served a lot of students and could barely get by. They spent almost all of their funding on salaries and really didn't have anything left over to spend on materials and supplies. And then you had other sites that were getting the same amount of money and serving way less students, like half of the number of students or even more than half of the number of students. And they had plenty of funds to get more equipment and things like that. But then a lot of times they couldn't even, they were having large amounts of money roll over from year to year. They weren't able to spend all their funds. And so I got this idea from other states that do this, and hopefully this is going to work out to be more equitable among all of our 21st century sites based on the number of hours you serve the kids and the number of kids that you plan to serve. So that is the formula. That's at this first bullet. The way your funding was calculated is the number of students that you plan to serve times the number of program hours for the academic year. So if you plan to do an academic program and a summer program, those two were calculated separately because obviously the number of program hours are going to be different from a school year versus the summer. And then also a lot of programs serve more kids during the summer than they do after school, or vice versa. So we did two different calculations. So it's the number of students served times the number of program hours. This is the number of hours per day times the days per week times the weeks per year to figure out how many program hours you're going to serve. And that gave the eligible award. Most people requested the full amount that they were eligible for. There might have been a few that requested less. I think there was like one or two that may have requested less than what they were eligible for, but most people requested the full amount. So here's what you have to do to maintain that funding that you've been awarded. Okay, so first of all, you need to maintain the program hours that you were funded for. So your actual program hours must equal the total number of program hours used to calculate the funding in the site's RFA. So let me just say this really quick. It's about the same thing, but I do want to make a side note. When the EGAP application that you guys filled out was developed, somehow I accidentally left off the box for you to put your program hours and days of the week and things like that. I had to do it really quickly, and I don't know how it got left off, but it got left off. And I didn't realize it until after the competition. So some of you were really good about going ahead and putting that information into your application. You just put it in somewhere wherever you thought it made sense. But some of you didn't put it. And so we need to know what your program hours are going to be. So as I have your ALSDE specialists reviewing your applications, they are going to start sending them back to you and telling you what things need to be edited in your application. And this may be something they ask you to do. If they can't find your program days of the week that your program is going to be open, the number of hours per day it's going to be open, and the number of weeks per year, they're going to ask you to put it in. And they're going to ask you to put it into the application details section under component 1, the second answer box. This was the box where you had to identify what schools are going to be served with your grant. And so that's where you identify your schools. That's the same box we want you to put your program hours into. Sorry, I was just making sure. I had a text, so make sure it wasn't having something to do with this. Okay, so they will ask you to add that information if it hasn't already been added. But we need to know your hours of operation, the days of the week the program will operate, and the number of weeks the program will operate. It should be 36 weeks because that's how many weeks are in a school year, and that's what the expectation is. You're expected to start your program on the first day of school and run it through the last day of school if at all possible. If you're not going to do that, we're going to be asking you, why are you not? What's the reasoning for not having your program the entire school year? Please keep in mind that during all 5 years of the grant, that hours per day times days per week times weeks per year, or if you're talking about summer, it would be the weeks per summer. They must at least equal the number of program hours used to calculate your funding in your original application. So what I mean by this is if next year you decide that you need to adjust your program hours, you need to make sure that you adjust it in a way that you're still serving the total amount of hours for the whole year that you said you were going to serve the kids. Otherwise, we're going to have to reduce your funding to the amount that you're actually serving. We'll have to go back through this calculation and figure out how much funding you would get for next year if you're adjusting your hours. So let's say that you're a middle school program and you said in your grant that you were going to go Monday through Friday, but now you've been through it for a year and you realize that you can't get kids to come on Friday because there's football games and basketball games or whatever on Fridays and they just don't come, and you want to just serve kids Monday through Thursday, you can do that, but you need to add time to your daily program so that when you calculate how many hours you're serving the kids for the whole year, it's at least equal to what was used to give you your funding. If not, we're going to have to cut your funding based on the hours that you are planning to serve those kids. So just keep that in mind. You can do that if you want to, just know that that would be the consequence of serving the kids for less amount of time than you said you were going to in your original application. And if you need to know what that is, even though we didn't have a place for you to put the hours of operation, the days of the week, the calculation is in the Cohort 26 application. So you can see how many hours you said you were going to serve those kids for. And that's something that our specialists are going to be looking at once you do put in your hours of operation, the days of the week, and then the weeks of your program. They're going to calculate that and make sure it matches the number of program hours that you said you were going to serve kids when we calculated your funding. If it doesn't, we're going to ask you about that, see if you want to adjust it to make it where it does match. And if you don't and it's less, then we'll have to go ahead and cut funding for this year. So just be aware of that. Okay, so the next part of this is making sure your student attendance stays where you said it was going to be. Now, actually, did I skip ahead? Yes, okay, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. So this is the slide about the attendance. So this is what it says in the RFA, and this is what we plan to stick to, is that in year one of your grant, we understand that you're building your program, that you may not be able to keep up with the attendance that you said. You might have had lofty goals and you may not quite serve as many kids as you said you were going to serve in your application. And that's fine. We understand in the first year of your grant, this is a learning year. This is new. It takes some time to get kids to come to 21st century. And so in this first year, we won't cut funding for attendance if you're not meeting the daily average attendance that you said you were going to meet. But in year two, by the end of year two, we expect that you should be meeting at least 75% of the number of kids that you said you were going to serve by the end of year two. So let's say that you said your program was going to serve 100 students. We expect you to be at least serving 75 children on a daily average basis, which we'll pull from easy reports. we expect you to be serving at least 75 kids by the end of year 2. If you're not serving at least 75 kids, then we may consider reducing your funding. It may not be in that first time, I think it actually says in the RFA that we'll reduce it to the number of kids that you are actually serving. We may not reduce it that much. We may give you a little bit more freedom, a little bit more time to try to build your program up before we fully cut you, but we will cut it some. So, so just be aware of that. And then in years 3, 4, and 5, by the end of those years, we expect you to be serving at least 85% of the kids that you said you were going to serve when you got your grant. So again, in the example, if you said you were going to serve 100 students, we expect you to be serving 85 on a regular basis or more. If you're not, at that time, we will, for the next year, we will cut your funding to the amount of kids that you are actually serving in your program. So let's say out of the 100 kids you said you were going to serve, you're actually only serving 70 students. Well, we'll go through, redo this calculation up here at the top with only 70 students to figure out how much money you'll get in year 4. We'll do that again at the end of year 4 for year 5. So hopefully everybody understands that, because this grant is based on the number of kids you said you were going to serve, we want to make sure that we are being diligent and making sure that you're serving the number of kids that you said you were going to serve, because we want it to be fair for everybody. Now, also, we just want to really, really make sure you understand that we know that because we're basing your funding off of attendance, we're going to be more careful to make sure that you are reporting your attendance accurately. That's one of the things that your TAs are going to be instructed to be looking for when they come and visit your site. If they come, they've been instructed to come and count the kids that are there. And if the day they show up, if you say that you've been serving 100 kids a day, but when they come and visit, there's only 50 kids there, that's going to be a huge red flag for us. We may ask them to come visit again unexpectedly and count again. This is what my husband works for child nutrition for the state. This is what they have to do also for their funding as well, because again, if you're with them at serving meals, the number of meals they serve, it should match the number of kids that are getting those meals. And there has been issues where people have kind of fibbed about the number of meals they're actually serving so they can get reimbursed for money that they shouldn't be reimbursed for. And so this kind of falls into that same category. We expect you to be honest when you're reporting your numbers. And of course, if we see at the end of year 1 that your numbers are way lower than what you said they were going to be, we're going to try to help you come up with ideas of how to build your program. We're going to talk to you about ways, things that you might be able to purchase or buy, or advertisement you might be able to do to get the kids to want to come to your program. Things like that. We're going to try to help you as much as we can build up your attendance so that we don't have to cut your funding. We don't want to do that, but we also don't want to continue to give you funding to serve a large amount of kids if you're not serving that large amount of kids. If we end up having to cut many programs, then we might have to do another grant award to give those funds to some of the people that applied for the grant that didn't get it. We might give them another chance to apply. So we just want to be as fair as possible with this as we can. But if you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to ask. We'll try to be as fair about this as we possibly can. Last thing I just wanted to make you aware of is, and I mentioned it earlier, but some sites were also awarded additional funds to provide transportation to their students, either for their academic school year or during their summer programs. Urban sites, or sites that are in the city, could apply for up to $10,000 in additional funds for transportation, and rural sites could apply for up to $20,000 additional dollars for transportation. So of course, if you applied for those funds and they were awarded to you, we do expect you to provide the transportation that you said you were going to provide in your application. It's one of the things that the specialists will also be looking at, just to make sure that you are providing transportation either during the school year or during the summer, or both. And when I say during the school year, I mean you're taking kids home from your afternoon program. And then when I say during the summer, it could be that you're providing transportation both to your program and back home. And you don't have to use the, like, for example, if you are a small system and you got the rural $20,000, but really it only takes you $15,000 to provide the transportation you stated that you would provide. We're not going to take back the other $5,000. You can just spend it on something else. You can put it towards travel for field trips. You could put it towards materials and supplies. We're not going to ask for any of those funds back. The only way that we would remove those funds is if you decide that you're not going to provide any transportation at all. Then we may remove those funds for the next year. But that would be the only case where that happens. Okay. All right. Each year we have to do continuation awards. So even though this is a 5-year grant, every year you have to do a continuation application to let us know what you plan to do for the next year. Typically, your plans and your activities shouldn't change a lot. Now, you can add things to your application, and we encourage you to do so, especially if what you're doing right now, what you've done for the past year, doesn't really seem to be working, or the kids don't want to come to it. If you're struggling having kids come to your program, then you may want to change some of the activities that you said you were going to do. And if that's the case, there will be a place in that continuation application for you to make updates to your program. Now, according to the feds, we're not supposed to allow you to make major updates, like major program changes, because we're supposed to stick to, as much as possible, the application that you submitted that was scored by those peer reviewers, and allowing you to completely change your program would not necessarily be fair. But we can let you make updates to it. So if you want to add some activities, that's definitely not a problem. If you see that an activity you're doing is not getting good participation, you could take that out potentially. It's just a chance for you to update things based on how things went the previous year. I mentioned earlier that you could potentially maybe add a grade or something. Let's say that you're an elementary school and your program, you said in your RFA that your program was going to serve, let's say K through 3rd grade, but the elementary school goes through K-5, and you decide you want to add in your 4th graders because you have the funding to do so, and the kids have the same basic needs, then we probably would allow that. Now, somebody in the last meeting this morning asked, well, we got the grant as a middle school program. Could we bring the elementary school kids up to our middle school program and serve them that way because they didn't get the grant this year? And that would probably be a no, because that's a major program change, bringing up multiple grades, bring them into another building. That's, and more than likely, even though they might have some of the same academic needs as far as like in math or language, the needs of a middle school child should be pretty different than the needs of an elementary school child. So that would be too much of a program change, and that would probably be denied, that kind of change. But we want you to think outside the box and add things as you see that your kids want to come to it, especially if you're having issues with attendance. We highly recommend to take advantage of the fact that you have all this extra funding, or more funding than these programs have had in the past. And we want you to buy some cool, fun things for the kids to do. Keep in mind that, and I'll touch on this more in a minute, but keep in mind that yes, the point of this program is academic achievement. We want you to we want to see an increase in academic achievement in these kids, but we also want to see you provide really fun activities for these kids, that's going to spark their interest and make them want to come to school and make them want to come to your program. And so if you know that the kids in your community have a huge interest in something and you want to add that activity to your program to get those kids to come to your after school program, then more than likely it's going to be a yes, that's going to be approved and it's not going to be a problem. Okay. Make sure I covered everything in here. Okay, so let me talk about carryover. Those of you who currently have a Cohort 16 grant know that I have a huge negative feeling towards carryover because it causes all kinds of problems with this type of grant. Problem with carryover is that it gives the site an additional year to spend funds. But at the end of that additional year, if the funds still haven't been spent, there's not any time to spend those funds before they have to go back to the federal government. And the last thing we want to do right now is send money back to the federal government, because nothing says we don't need your money like sending them money back unspent, right? And with our current administration that we have right now, we don't want to send that message. And in the past, we've always allowed carryover, and right now we have a huge amount of unspent funds for 21st century. And I just had a meeting with the current 21st century cohorts about how important it was to get these funds spent down, and how concerned I am that we're not going to spend down enough funds and we may end up actually sending some money back to the feds, which is very, very much frowned upon, especially right now. So when I wrote this grant for 26, I didn't want carryover to be allowed, but I sent it to we have a contract with the Bruman, the Bruman Group, which is a law firm that like knows everything there is to know about all federal funding. And we have a contract with them. They've been helping us make sure that we're doing all the things that we're supposed to do correctly. And they reviewed my grant and they advised for me to change the wording to that carryover would be allowed, but the next year's grant may be reduced by the amount of funds that are being carried over. And I did what they asked, but I regret doing that. And I can tell you for Cohort 26, carryover will not be allowed. And if I can figure out a way to change it, if I can find out if it's okay for me to change for, I'm sorry, 27, it won't be allowed. I can figure out a way to change it in 26 after the fact, I may do that, because more than likely that's what we're going to do, is that whatever you haven't spent by a certain time, we will probably reduce the next year's funds by the amount that you still have not spent. We'll let you know what that date is way in advance. It's probably going to be sometime in the summer, like before the new school year starts. So, and I don't know that this is going to be the date. I'm just throwing this out there as an example, but it could be that we put out there, we let you know in plenty of time in advance, whatever you haven't spent by, let's say, July 30th or maybe August 15th. If you haven't spent, if you still have remaining funds on August 15th, then whatever is remaining, I'm going to reduce your next grant the next year by that amount. You'll still get your carryover funds. It's not going to reduce your grant year amount, but you won't have that extra money that you can keep carrying over from year to year that continues to keep growing and growing and growing. So the reason behind, and I mean, I've already said some of the reasons behind this, but another reason behind it is the funds are really supposed to be spent in the year in which they were allocated on the kids which they were allocated for. So, you know, it really shouldn't be allowed to continue to keep carrying over and over and over again. If you can't spend the funds in the year which they were allocated to you, then we're giving you too much money. Now, obviously, a small amount of money carrying over is not a big deal. When I say small, I mean like 10,000 or less. I get, you wanting to be careful that you don't go over your budget, that you don't spend too much. That's fine. I'm talking about like 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. We had some sites, some subgrantees this year that carried over as much as 600,000 this year, which was just crazy. We had millions of dollars that carried over from last year. Now, part of that was because of ESSER funds. but we just can't continue to allow stuff like that to happen. So just wanted to put that out there that we really want you to spend the funds in the year in which they were given to you for the kids which they were allocated to you for. All right, I'm still not seeing any questions pop up. So just if anything comes up in your head you want to ask a question about, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat. I'm just going to keep on trucking on. Hopefully y'all are paying attention. Okay, so now we're going to talk about regulations and requirements of the grant. This is, I'll try to keep this as not boring as possible, but I do want to make sure that you guys are aware of all these regulations. A lot of them are federal regulations, some of them are state regulations, but these are all things that we want you to make sure you're aware of as you spend your funds and plan out your year and things like that. So first, of course, you have to adhere to the federal regulations, statutory requirements, and state level program requirements as outlined in the RFA. Another good reason for you to go read the RFA. Also within the RFA, there's a link to a lot of the federal laws and guidelines that you need to be aware of and read. Your program should have an academic focus. And this, I think it hasn't always been said that way in the past. I think in the past, actually I heard it at a meeting when I very first got this job. I heard one of our specialists say, you know, this is really more about enrichment. It doesn't have to be about academics, but that's not true. It specifically says in all the federal regulations that the focus of your program should be academic improvement. Now, you don't have, everything that you do doesn't have to be specifically for the purpose of academic improvement. We do want you, of course, to have enrichment activities that are going to, in a way, affect academic improvement by getting those kids excited about coming to school, making them happier in their lives, or getting them to do fun things. You know, that's going to help with academic improvement, but you do need to have some academic aspects to the activities that you're doing with your kids in your after school program or during your summer program. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Is it required for, okay, I get a question. Is it required for new 21st century sites to start on the first day of school? Yes, it is. That is the expectation for you to start on the first day of school. So, so yeah, that's the answer. That's what the federal government, that's what the feds ask, is for programs to start on the first day. And so that, and now we get that on the first day, you may only have a handful of kids. Some of you may not have prepared, you know, you may not have sent out applications for 21st century at the end of last year. If you haven't, I would suggest you go ahead and create some sort of application and start sending those out to the parents and getting kids to sign up to be part of the 21st century program. But yes, the expectation that's in the RFA, and yes, the expectation is for you to start your program on the first day of school. Okay, so programming operation. All 21st century services must be provided outside the regular school day or during periods when school is not in session. So it needs to be either before school, after school, in the evenings, weekends, holidays, or during the summer. A program may offer services to students during normal school hours on days when school is not in session. So if you want to, you actually can offer a 21st century service, you know, program services like on a holiday. Or if the school is closed for professional development days, you could do your 21st century program all day during that time. Just understand that if you add extra days like that, those hours don't go towards what's considered your hours that were used to calculate your funding. Those are just extra program hours that you've added in on top of your required hours that you used when calculating the funding for your grant. However, so you can offer activities to family members of the students, and those could potentially take place during the school day, because obviously if they're adults, they're not going to school during that time, and you can offer activities for families. So for example, I think we have a site or two that's offering GED classes for families of students that are part of their 21st century program. Those GED classes can take place during the school day if that's the best time to have them. Because you're not serving students during that time, you're serving adults during that time. Now, let me just go ahead and throw this out there. If you do want to do something like that, like offer a GED program, it can only be to the family members of the students that you're serving. So it's not something you can offer to your entire community. That's not how it works. The grant specifically says it's just for family members. So it could be parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever who need it, but you do need to make sure that those family members are tied to a 21st century student before you offer a program like that. You also need to make sure you're offering your program to private schools that are in the service area that you're serving. So if you have a private school that's located near the school you're serving, you should have already reached out to them before writing your grant to see if they would be interested in their students attending the 21st century program. If you didn't, just don't tell us, and that should have been part of your application. But still, if you have families reach out to you from private schools that are in the attendance area of the schools that you're serving, and they want their child to participate in your after school program, then you have to allow them to participate in an equitable manner that you allow the public school kids to participate. So let me expand on this. So let's say you are going to do an application for children to be part of your 21st century program. If you have a private school that's located, the building of that private school is located in the attendance area of the school you're serving, then you also need to make sure that they have the applications as well, and that their students can apply equitably to your public school kids applying. You can't put your public school kids first. You have to have, it needs to be equitable. So you could send out the same application to both the private school and the public school kids, tell them there's a deadline, and then accept, if you said you were going to serve 100 kids, you accept the first 100 applications, whether those first 100 were private school or public school. And then after that, you could have a waiting list. Now I see the question, what about homeschool kids in the area? Technically, yes. If they reach out and ask if a homeschool child can come and participate in your 21st century program, and they live in the attendance area of the school that you're serving, then you also would have to give them equitable access to the program as well. Again, though, if that's the case, they would have to bring the child to your program. You wouldn't have to provide transportation or anything like that. It would need to be equitable. Now, when I say that, though, let me make sure I'm being clear. If it's a summer program and you said that you're going to provide transportation for all the kids in that attendance area, and that homeschool child falls within that attendance area, you may have to pick up that kid at that homeschool, at their house. If they live within that attendance area, you may have to add them to your route and pick them up as well. But as far as like after school programming, you're not providing, more than likely the kids, there may be a couple situations where kids are being transported to a 21st century program, but in most cases they are already going to school where that 21st century program is taking place. So you're not providing transportation. So if those homeschool kids wanted to come, their parents would have to bring them to it. Or you could, another way that could be done, even for the summer thing, it could be that, you work out a pickup area. The parents would have to bring them to an area that's an agreed upon place where they could be picked up and then taken to the school. So y'all, you can figure that out. If you need help figuring that out, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we can try to kind of help you figure out how that works. But yeah, that's the way that works. Now you can have, you can set some sort of regulations of how you're going to accept students. So you could, in your application, you could give priorities to certain students, but those priorities need to be equal, whether it's a public school or a private school child. So If you say that your priority is going to be to allow children that are struggling academically in math and reading, and you have a criteria that's going to be used, then you would need to figure out a way to have the same sort of criteria or an equitable criteria for those private school students. I used to work with private schools and with federal programs before I got this job. And so I can tell you that all private schools, they may not give the same tests that we give in the public school, but they all still do some sort of testing with their kids. And so you would just need to kind of figure out what's equitable. The test may have a different name, but they still do some sort of um, not formative assessment. Anyway, I don't know. I hate it when my brain doesn't work. They do some sort of testing, end of year assessment. Summative. Thank you, thank you, Catherine. I hate it when my brain doesn't work. The private schools all do some sort of summative assessment, and so you kind of use that same assessment to determine whether those kids would qualify for your program if you choose to make that something like that a priority. Just keep it equitable is the main thing with that one. I'm sorry if this is hard for you guys to see. These are links. This background is not the best. Let's see if I can actually fix that right now. Watch me just delete the whole thing. No, that's not what I want. Oh gosh. Anyway, we're just gonna leave it like it is. When I send this to you, though, hopefully you'll be able to see these better, but these are each links. These are federal regulations that are tied to 21st century. I was going to try to go through each one of these with you, and I can kind of touch on them, but some of them are a little bit more extensive than others. And so I really feel like it's the wisest thing to do is for you to go and make sure that you've read these federal regulations. If you don't want to read it, you may need to get, your financial, whoever's handling your financials to read it, because a lot of it has to do with the financials. Or, if you have somebody that kind of handles legal stuff for your system. Now, if you're an LEA, the people who do things like your financials and things probably are all already aware of these rules and regulations, but it's still a good idea for you just to go read through them. All right, before I go over these, I just saw another question pop up. It said, accept first applications up to the number allowable, but that last comment makes it seem as though you can cull out those with greatest academic need first, which is accurate. You can do either one. As long as what you do is equitable among your public and your private school kids. So if you want to base it off of who turns in an application first, then that needs to be how you do it. If you need to go ahead and decide before your applications go out, okay, we're going to take the first 100 applications, and then after that, there's going to be a waiting list. If that's what you decide you're going to do, then it needs to be equitable among your public and your private school kids. If you decide that you want to focus your program on kids that have some sort of academic need, then you need to determine what that academic need is going to be, and you need to apply it to anybody who applies, whether it's a public school child or a private school child. So if you say that you're going to let students into your priority is going to be students who are need math or reading intervention. I'm not an elementary school teacher. I've never been an elementary school teacher, so I'm not sure what testing you guys use. But if you want to come up with some sort of criteria of the kids that you're going to accept into your program first, that's fine. You just need to have an equitable way to include your private school kids in that criteria as well. It just needs to be equitable among the two. You shouldn't be thinking of it really shouldn't be that you're thinking of ways to exclude the private school kids to keep them from signing up. If that appears to be the situation, depending on the private school kids, it may create a problem for you, because those who know the law know that their kids are supposed to get equitable services to the kids at the public school. So they should have equitable opportunity to participate in the 21st century program as the public school kids. And so you want to make sure that you're being fair in how you're choosing what kids you're going to serve. If that's even a problem. Some of you may not be even a problem, you may not have any private schools, or you may not have enough kids interested where you can accept everybody. But if you feel like it's going to be a problem and you need to come up with some criteria ahead of time as to what your cutoff is going to be or how you're going to cut kids off, that needs to be equitable, whether you're looking at private school or public school kids. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay, let's talk about these federal regulations. The first one is 2 CFR Part 25. I know y'all might have a hard time seeing this. But it is just saying that everybody who applies for federal funding has to have a universal identifier number. It's a UEI number, and have to be registered in the system for award management. So all LEAs should have a UEI number. Hopefully all the CBOs have one as well. We do have to get that number. We have to have that number before we can allocate any funds to you. So if it's not already in your application, we'll be asking for that number. Can't remember if I included it in the application this time or not. I should have, but I haven't gone and checked. But we will be asking for that number from you if we don't already have it. 2 CFR Part 170 is a requirement for certain people to report their subawards to a federal system, and also, but it's over, I can't remember the amount, but basically if you get a certain amount of funding from the federal government and it makes up like most of your program's funding, then you have to report your highest paid executives compensation to the federal government. So there's like a website that you have to go to report how much you pay. I think it's like the top 5 people in your organization. But most of you probably would not fall into this category. But again, you know, it's something that you need to check into just to make sure that that's something that you're not supposed to be doing. Again, if you're an LEA, that's probably already being taken care of for you. If you're a CBO, you're probably not going to fall into this unless you get almost all of your funding from some sort of federal award. If that's the case, then you probably do need to look into this one more carefully and make sure that you are doing this if you qualify to do this. 2 CFR Part 175. This is about human trafficking. This one's kind of extensive. It talks about all the different forms of human trafficking, and that as a person who is receiving a federal award, you want to make sure that you have nothing to do with any kind of human trafficking, that you're not involved in any kind of sexual misconduct, no pornography, you know, you're not tied to any kind of pornography or anything like that. It's like it lists a lot of different things that kind of fall into the umbrella of human trafficking. So hopefully that does not apply to anybody who is in this right now, but that is what 2 CFR Part 175 talks about. 2 CFR Part 180 is saying that it talks about how a federal award shouldn't be given to a program or to an organization that has been debarred or suspended. And also there's I'm not sure if this one goes into it, but I know somewhere in the federal regulations, it talks about how when you purchase things or when you hire a vendor, you also are supposed to check the sam.gov website to make sure that company is not on the list of government-wide debarment and suspension list. So you're supposed to go on sam.gov and make sure that they have not been debarred or suspended from being allowed to have things purchased from them with federal funds. 2 CFR Part 200. This is the uniform grant requirements. It's very long, many pages long, but this is all of the federal requirements when it comes to procurement, cost principles, what's allowable, what's not allowable, audit requirements, and things like that. Most of this book right here that I'm holding up is 2 CFR 200. So whenever you guys ask if you can buy something, this is one of the first places I go and try to, if it's something that I haven't had anybody ask before and I'm not sure if it's allowable or not, I go here. This is a book written by Edgar, but you can also access 2 CFR. You can access any of these regulations online. If you just type it into Google, it'll pull up the federal, the government website where it'll take you straight to that regulation where you can read it yourself and see what is and is not allowable. 34 CFR Part 76 talks specifically about state administered programs and the rules and regulations around that, which this is considered because, and you'll notice in some places you'll see that you're called, some people call you guys grantees and some call you subgrantees. I have been trying to make it a habit to call you all subgrantees because technically that is what you are. Technically, Alabama is the 21st century grantee because the federal government grants the entire award, entire 21st century award to the state of Alabama. And then you guys are subgrantees because we then take that big award and we subgrant it out to you guys. And so technically that's what you are. And there's certain rules and regulations around programs that are subgranted out by state programs. So you can check those out. 34 CFR Part 77 is just some different definitions. And then 34 CFR Part 81 is the General Education Provisions Act enforcement. So this is just some more provisions that apply to 21st century. And then 34 CFR Part 82 is restrictions on lobbying. So technically, I know as a state entity, we're not allowed to lobby for the program. You need to check that out. I'm not sure at an LAA level if you're allowed to lobby or not if you're getting these funds. I know we do have some people that do some lobbying stuff, so I probably need to read that one a little bit more carefully myself, and to see what the restrictions are on that. And that's just basically lobbying. Of course, if you don't know, is like going to the government and trying to continue a program like or try to get different legislatures or congressmen or whatever to support the program. Technically, we're not really supposed to do that. You can hire people outside of your program to do it, not with 21st century funds, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. So if you ever just want some exciting reading material, I highly recommend that you go and read these. But all of this comes, and I know this is hard to see, but all of this comes from Title IV, Part B of ESEA, which is all pertaining to, this is the actual laws that pertain to 21st century. The link right here is what takes you to that. Okay, moving on. So when you guys got your grant, your LEA superintendent, or in the case of a CBO, your CEO, had to sign a form of certifications and assurances. They also had to do it within the EGAP system when they submitted your application. So they did it all on paper and they did it again in EGAP. Now, they didn't have to sign anything in EGAP, but there was a part of the EGAP application that just basically said, by submitting this application, you are saying that you are saying that you will adhere to these certifications and assurances. But then it was also one of your attachments that had to be submitted with your application. So I want to make sure I go over those with you guys, because they may have read them carefully. They may not have read them. They may have just signed it. But these are all things that are requirements of the grant that you all need to be aware of. Okay, so let's talk about the certifications first. These are all federally required to be part of the application. So this is not something that we came up with. This is something that the federal government requires. So the first thing is that by signing the certification, or by signing the application, your superintendent leadership of your program certified that they have legal authority to apply for federal assistance, and they have institutional, managerial, and financial capability to ensure proper planning, management, and completion of your project. So basically, you're just saying you're a legitimate organization. You have the proper controls and measures in place to be able to run this program and manage it well, is basically what they were saying in this first bullet. Second bullet is that they certify that they will give the ALSDE, the Alabama State Department of Education, access to and the right to examine any records, books, papers, or documents related to this award. And you will establish proper accounting system in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP or GAAP principles. So in other words, you have a proper accounting system in place where you are keeping up with your books, you're keeping up with your receipts and your documents, you're keeping up with all of your expenditures. All of the LEAs should definitely have this in place already. Some of your CBOs, if you're new to this and you don't have something in place, please reach out to us and we will help you get something in place, but this is a requirement of the grant. So we could kind of put you in touch with some other CBOs to see what accounting software or measures they use to keep up with all their expenditures, but you definitely have to have some sort of accounting system in place that that works in accordance with these generally accepted accounting principles. You also need to make sure you have an accounting system in place that has sufficient internal controls, a clear audit trail, and written cost allocation procedures. That system needs to be able to distinguish expenditures that are attributable to this grant versus expenditures that are not, especially if you have funding from multiple resources, which most of you all should. Whether you're an LEA or a CBO. And by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned this, some of you may not know what a CBO is. A CBO is a community-based organization. And some of you, it's potential there could be an FBO. I'm not sure. That would be a faith-based organization. I'm calling all of you CBOs, but it's basically just a private organization outside of a public school, outside of an LEA. But anyway, you should be able to, in your accounting system, there should be a way for you to distinguish which expenditures are 21st century expenditures versus other expenditures that should be paid for with a different grant or a different funding source. So you need to make sure you have that in place. You have to maintain adequate supporting documents for your expenditures. So you need to make sure that you have disbursement ledgers, journals, payroll registers, and that you can support your expenditures by source documents such as receipts, travel vouchers, invoices, bills, or in-kind vouchers. So you need to make sure you're keeping up with all of this. For LEAs, it's almost kind of unfair, to be honest with you, for you CBOs, because LEAs, we don't check these sources or these documents as often as we do with CBOs, because we feel like LEAs have been working with federal funds for a really long time. They should have the accounting processes in place to make sure that they are spending these funds the way that they're supposed to be spent. And so we don't ask that those receipts and travel vouchers and things like that be submitted to us to review on a regular basis. They are reviewed during compliance monitoring, but not usually any other time. However, that could potentially change In the past, the way that we have done this is we don't ask for that documentation from LEAs, but we have been asking for it from CBOs. And the reason for that is because CBOs don't always necessarily have the same experience with working with federal funding, and they tend to make more mistakes. They tend to maybe purchase things that are not allowed more often, or they don't allocate things in the correct way. So we have to kind of watch them a little bit more carefully. So up until this point, we've always, made them, anytime they submit an expense report, we ask to see all of their documentation to back up those expenses, and we go carefully through that documentation. Anything that we see that is not allowable or isn't has not been done the correct way, we send it back, and we may not reimburse for those items and things like that. We are going to continue to do that. However, I can say this. We are going to try to be more lenient with the CBOs that are doing things the right way. And so when you are submitting your documentation, if the ALSDE specialists don't have complaints, you're not submitting things that are unallowable. They're not having to send it back multiple times because you did your math wrong. If things are correct and we see that they're being done the right way, for the first few times it's submitted, we may say, okay, when you submit your next expenditure, you don't have to send me your documentation. We may start, if we see that things are being done accurately and that you understand the way to do this, then we may only check your documentation, once every few months or once, quarterly or something like that. So I do want to kind of award the CBOs that are doing things the right way, by letting you guys know that right now, that if you submit things on time and you submit things the right way and we're not finding lots of flaws and errors, then you won't have to submit that documentation every time. However, on the flip side of that, if there is always something wrong, there's always things added up the wrong way, there's always people being paid incorrectly, then we're going to continue to ask to see that documentation every time you submit a reimbursement, so that we can make sure that we aren't reimbursing you for things that are not allowable, because in the long run, that can get you guys in trouble. It could get us in trouble, and we don't want anybody going, I don't look good in orange, and you probably don't either. We don't want anybody going to federal prison, so we just want to be more careful about that. Now, I had a conversation with Dr. Killingsworth about this, and she was on board also with us asking to see documentation from some of our LEAs sometimes. And so that is something that we might start doing, especially if we see some red flags that maybe things aren't being done the way they should be done. In some areas, we may ask to see your documentation for your ES2s. And we do ask to see it definitely during compliance monitoring, but that's only going to be like every 5 years. So we may once a year ask if we can see your documentation and go through your receipts and things like that. So just be aware that that's a possibility, and you just need to make sure that whoever your financial person is keeping up with those things the way they're supposed to be keeping up with it, and that we could at any time ask to see your documentation to support the expenditures that you're claiming for this program. Okay. All right. Next, we're continuing with these certifications. They certified that they will comply with the Office of Management and Budget 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart E cost principles. That's this book again. And that you're purchasing things that are allowable, reasonable, and allocable to this grant. Again, we will help you with this. If we see if you're good about putting things in your budget, then hopefully we will catch anything that you plan to purchase that's not allowable or not reasonable or applicable before you actually purchase those items. We will help you with this. So even though we do encourage you to be aware of all of the rules and regulations, we understand that it's a lot and it's a lot to remember. And so we're here to help you with that. You also have to maintain PARs or personnel activity records for all of your staff. So this would include your program director and site coordinators, all of your staff that works, anybody who's paid with 21st Century Funds, you should be submitting PARs for that back up the amounts that you're paying these staff members. And so those should detail the hours that they work for 21st Century. And those hours should coincide with your program hours. There are some circumstances that we'll talk about later where you could potentially work like an hour before your program or an hour after. We'll talk about that probably on another day. We'll go more into detail about PARs. The next certification is that you will they certify that you'll approve all expenditures, document receipts of goods and services, and record payments on your accounting system before you submit a reimbursement claim. So in other words, don't just submit a reimbursement. You need to make sure that your documentation is in order and that all of that documentation has been approved. You've gone through it before you submit a reimbursement claim to the ALSDE. They certify that they'll initiate and complete work within the applicable time frame after receipt of approval by the ALSDE. So if you have asked for permission to purchase a certain item or hire a certain vendor, then you need to make sure and we approve it, you need to make sure you do it within a reasonable amount of time that you get those people into work or that you purchase that item in a reasonable amount of time. Next, you have to certify that you're not going to discriminate against any employees because of race, color, religion, age, sex, national origin, or disability. So basically, you're saying that you will comply with the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, along with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. I'm not going to read all these to you, but all these different acts and titles that have to do with discrimination, you want to make sure that you are not discriminating anybody who falls under any of these different laws and regulations. Okay, almost done with certifications. All right, your leadership that certify that they would comply with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, that they will comply with 2 CFR Part 25 to register and receive a unique entity identifier number, and that they will, if they are required to do so, that they will register in the system for award management. They certify they'll comply with 2 CFR 200.112 and disclose in writing any potential conflicts of interest to the ALSDE. And you will comply with 2 CFR 200.113 and disclose in writing to the ALSDE any violations of federal criminal law involving fraud, bribery, or gratuity violations potentially affecting the federal award. This one I wanted to point out to you guys, this is all your responsibility. If you see that federal funds are not being spent the way that they're supposed to be spent, if you feel like some sort of fraud is going on or bribery, or that people are being hired because they're somebody's friend, some kind of gratuity violation is going on, anything like that is happening. This is saying that it's your job to disclose in writing that this is happening to us at the ALSDE as quickly as possible and let us know that this violation is being taken place. If you ever feel like someone in leadership at your organization or in your LAA is not spending federal funds the way they're supposed to be spending it, you should be reporting that to the ALSDE in writing. And then we will take it from there and, investigate and that sort of thing. Also, what I don't have on here, but it is new, there are new laws and rules in place that are basically called whistleblower protection laws that basically just say if you're a whistleblower, which is just a code name or a nickname for someone who does turn someone in for breaking a federal law, that they can't fire you for that or penalize you for that, like take your retirement away or anything like that. It's a protection law for anybody who does report this kind of abuse that occurs. So those are in place as well. Those are fairly new in the federal regulations. All right, that's all the certifications. If you're still awake, anybody has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. And I'm going to keep going. And if you need to step away to go to the restroom or something, please feel free to do so. I'm just going to try to cover as much information as I can. And of course, we are recording this. And, if you miss something, you can come back. Please don't leave and then come back at the end on purpose. But, if you have to step away for a minute for some sort of personal break, then you're welcome to do that. All right, let's talk about the assurances. So by signing that form, your leadership assured that the project will take place in a safe, easily accessible facility that is conducive to an effective learning environment. So most schools should fall under this guideline. Most public schools especially should be going through some sort of safety, checks and measures to make sure that their school is safe. But if you're having your program in a location that's outside of a public school building, you do need to make us aware of that and just let us know what safety and regulations you do have in place to make sure the kids are safe. It is possible one of us might have to come out and just kind of check it out and just look to make sure that the facility is safe. But again, of course, most programs are going to be housed at schools, but there are some times when they're housed at a church or at another building. So please just make sure that we are aware of that if that's the situation. We just may need to check into it, just come out and check it out and make sure that the building is safe for the kids. They assured that the project was developed and will be carried out in active collaboration with the schools the students attend. This is really important. So you need to make sure that your 21st century program collaborates with the school. In most cases, hopefully this does happen, but a lot of times in situations, especially with CBOs, that may not happen as often. Or if new leadership comes into a building, it may not happen as often. So when the grant was written, when you guys got there's cases where when you wrote your application, you had a principal at that school that was all fired up about having a 21st century program at their school, and they were on board and they helped plan and they did great. But then that principal left and somebody new came into the building and maybe they're not as on board with it. Maybe they're not as into helping plan and things like that. So if that's the case, you really need to make every effort possible to make sure that there is that collaboration going on between your 21st century staff and the staff at the school. And this is also in the RFA, and it's an expectation. You're supposed to have someone in your program whose job it is to be a what is the word? I love it when my brain doesn't work. Not a collaborator, but that's kind of right. They're supposed to be the person who is who makes sure that there's communication occurring between the school and the 21st century teachers. Liaison. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you. I love it when people take care of me when my brain is not working correctly. Okay, so yes, you're supposed to have a liaison as part of your program. It could be your program director, it could be your site coordinator, it could be somebody that you specifically hire for just that job. But you're supposed to have a liaison that kind of makes sure that communication is occurring between the school day teachers and the teachers for your 21st century program. Because that is going to guarantee, your best opportunity to guarantee that you're meeting the needs of those students. As I mentioned earlier, the true the biggest goal of this program is academic achievement. And if you're not sure what the kids are struggling with in school, then how are you going to help them in the after school program? You need to be having that communication. Um, and that could be specific information on each kid, or it could be more general information. It could be that you just know that the third grade students in general at that school are struggling in math and you need to hire somebody to help with math intervention. Or it could be that you are specifically talking to each of those kids' students. Maybe you're sending a folder to that teacher on a weekly basis where they can report back to you and say, hey, little Johnny needs help with this. Little Johnny needs help with that. Little Susie needs help with this. And you could really tailor the instruction in the afternoon to the needs of those kids. Because when we report numbers to the federal government, a lot of the numbers that we report are school day numbers. It's school day achievement, it's school day attendance, it's school day behavior. That's what's being reported to the feds. And that's what we have to make sure is being affected by what you guys are doing in your after school program. So you've got to have that active collaboration, not just in the development of your RFA, but throughout your entire program so that you can make sure that you are providing what those kids need. Also, you could talk to those teachers and administrators, I think, and the school day staff about what the kids are into, what clubs are kids really trying to get into that you could incorporate into your after school program. What activities do the kids really love? Are they like super into anime and maybe you could have an anime drawing class in the afternoon? Are they super into video games and you could have an esports activity in the afternoon? Those are the kind of things that you could find out. And of course, you can ask the kids those questions too, but asking the adults in the community, asking the people at the school what the kids really like is also going to be very, very helpful. So please, please, please try to make sure that communication is going on. And if you try your hardest to reach out to the school staff and administration and they're just blowing you off, please let me know and I will try to either myself or I'll get, one of the specialists, we'll try to kind of facilitate your relationship in whatever way. We might send a TA out to help with it, but we'll try to help build that relationship with your school so that you can really, really make the most out of this program. Okay. Another assurance is that you will primarily target students who attend schools that are eligible for Title I school-wide programs and their families. So this was a requirement of the grant that we had, that you had to target students who attend Title I schools. I think pretty much all of you met that requirement. And so not to say you can't serve a school that's not a Title I school, but you should primarily target students who attend Title I schools. And so if you're not doing that, then you need to work on that. It might be that you slip through, but I don't think that's the case for anybody. I think we're good with that one. Almost done with the assurances. Okay, so they assured that the funds awarded will be used to increase the level of state, local, or other funds that would, in the absence of these funds, be made available for authorized programs and activities and will not supplant federal, state, and local funds. Okay, so this is the supplement, not supplant assurance. And so let me explain to you what that means. What that means is that if you currently use, let's say that you currently have, before you got this grant, you had an after-school program already in existence at your school, and you use either local funds to pay teachers to do that program, or maybe you use the ARI literacy funds or the OMI mathematics funds. You use some other funding program to pay for that after-school program. You cannot replace those funds with 21st century funds now that you got the grant and then use those funds for something else. That would be considered supplanting. you have to continue to use your original source of funds for your after-school program, and these funds have to be additional. They have to be supplemental to what you're currently already doing. Now, a lot of you may have an after-school program, may have had an after-school program in place that you were supporting with ESSER funds. Well, that's different because ESSER funds don't exist anymore. So if the funding source has gone away and is no longer accessible, then you're okay, you're fine. That's not supplanting. But if that fund source is still available, and just because you got the 21st Century Grant, you're going to now use those funds for something else, that's not allowed. If you get caught doing that, that's considered supplanting, and that's against federal regulations. So be careful that you don't do that. Now, this last sentence in here that talks about the summer reading camps, which are required by state law, that also applies to them. What we tell you guys to do in that case is we encourage you to braid your funds with the summer reading camp funds. So as you know, we now have a state law that you're supposed to provide summer reading camps to certain students of certain grade levels who are struggling, who are falling below a certain level in English and math. And we've had issues the past couple of years with these camps because it's like they're competing with 21st century summer programming, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want that from 21st century standpoint. We don't want that. I can tell you that the Office of Math Improvement doesn't want that, and the Office of ARI, the Alabama Reading Initiative, doesn't want that. They don't want these camps to compete, these programs to compete against each other. What we want to see happen is that you braid the funds together to serve all the kids in one camp that meets the needs of all the students, but you're still abiding by the state laws and state regulations when it comes to the math and the language camps, or the ARI, the reading camps, but you're also serving those kids with 21st century funds. So let me give you an example of how this could work. Let's say that you're going to do a summer program, and it's going to last from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you have to serve, you have gotten those, you have students that need to be served using those ARI, that reading initiative funding, or the OMI, the math funding that's required. And you have to meet the needs of those kids. But you can also serve those same kids using 21st century funds. So the way this could work is that it could be that during certain times of the day, you have all the kids, whether they are supposed to be served with that reading intervention or not, you have all the kids participating in certain activities together. So maybe they're doing enrichment activities. They could be doing art. They could be doing physical activities. They could be, they're doing some sort of enrichment that would fall under 21st century. Whoever's leading those activities, you can pay with 21st century funds, even though some of those kids are your reading initiative kids, right? You're also going to say they're 21st century kids. They're doing 21st century activities during that time of the day, so they're 21st century kids, and you're paying whoever's facilitating that activity with 21st century funds. You're paying for the materials needed with 21st century funds for that activity. Then later in the day, you split those kids, and some of them go and do their ARI reading initiative activities, and some of them go and maybe they do a reading activity, but it's not on the same level. It's not that intervention. Maybe it's something different. It could still be an activity that helps with reading, but it could be something, not as intensive, or it could be, they're learning a play or something like that. But all the kids are doing reading, but you've got the kids who have to be in that reading program, which is state mandated. They go and do their intervention while you have the other kids go do something else. When that happens, the teacher that leads that intervention activity and the materials and things for that intervention activity, that's going to be paid for with your ARI, your reading initiative funds, right? While when the kids go and do the other activity that doesn't apply to the reading initiative, whoever's leading that is going to be paid for with 21st century funds. The materials and supplies for that activity is going to be paid for 21st century funds. And you would continue this throughout the day until you've met the requirements of your reading initiative and you've met the requirements of the math initiatives, but you've also allowed those students to do fun activities, enrichment activities as well. This benefits everybody. We don't have the two camps competing against each other. We don't have two different camps that are both trying to find staff that's willing to work during the summer. Now you just need one set of staff. You've got the reading initiative funds focusing on those reading initiative activities. And then you've got 21st century funds that are focusing on all the other fun stuff. And then also you're giving those kids that have to come for that intensive reading, you're giving them some fun things to do too, so that they want to come. You know, they want to, you know, they may not want to come to do those reading initiative activities, but they want to come do the fun stuff. And so it's really benefits everybody. It's just, you have to be careful about the way you spend the funds and make sure that you spend the appropriate pot of funds for the appropriate activities. And then sometimes there's cases where that pot of funds, either one can go towards something. So let's say administration. You can use your ARI funds to pay an administrator, and you can use your 21st century funds to pay an administrator. So you'll just use whichever one makes the most sense at the time. Maybe you're running low on ARI funds, and so you're going to use more of your 21st century funds to pay the admin. Maybe it's the other way around. As long as it's applicable and allowable for you to pay for that activity with those funds, you can go ahead and do it that way. You just got to keep them separate. So if you need more help with this, if that's something that you're interested in doing next year, then we will help you come up with a schedule, help you figure out a way to do this, help you figure out ways to braid those funds together so that you're doing it, you know, that you're meeting all the rules and requirements of ARI and the math rules and requirements, but also you are you're not supplanting and you're not breaking any rules with 21st century either. So just let us know if that's something you need help with in the future. Okay, almost done with the assurances. Your admin had to assure that the community was notified of the applicant's intent to submit an application. So somehow you should have advertised this to your community. And then also, it doesn't say it here, but says it somewhere, that once you get the grant, you also need to make your community aware that you have the 21st century grant. So you can do that through your applications that you send home to your students. You need to put it on your school's website, whatever the case may be, but you do need to let the school and the community know that you got this grant. And then finally, that's what's in the next line. Sorry. The applicant, after the submission, will make the application in any waiver request available for public review. So really, your application itself should also be available for public review. If anyone asks to see it, you should be able to make that available for them to see. Okay. We got 55 more minutes. All right. Everybody take a little break. I'm going to take a sip of my drink. And then we're going to move on. Sorry, this is not more interactive, but you guys are welcome to ask questions at any time. I'm constantly looking at the chat screen if anything pops up. So please do not hesitate to ask something if you have a question. All right, now we're getting into the state program requirements. These are the requirements that we as a state have said we want you guys to focus on. And there's 6 focus areas that we've said we expect all 21st century subgrantees to focus on with their programs. The first of those areas is academic achievement and student engagement when it comes to English language arts, reading, and mathematics. Okay, so we expect all programs to have activities that address English language arts, reading, and mathematics at some point during their programming. Okay. We're not saying all your activities have to focus on these 3 things, but you should have these built into your programming at some point during the week. preferably something each day, but that's not a requirement. You just need to have something at least each week to address these areas. Can you also address science? Absolutely. Can you also address history? Absolutely. Whatever the needs are of your students, you're welcome to include that. These are the areas that are required, okay, as far as academic achievement. The second focus area that we want you to try to help with is attendance. And when I say attendance, I'm talking about attendance during the regular school day. I've already touched on this some, but when we report our GEPRA measures, which is talked about in the RFA, and we'll talk about them more closely during another training. But that is the data that we have to report, or that you guys actually have to report through Easy Reports to the federal government. They are looking at they're wanting to see an increase in attendance from one year to the next of your 21st century program kids. Well, how are you after school going to affect attendance during the school day? You're going to do it by encouraging kids to come to school by offering fun and exciting activities for them to do in your after school program. They can't come to the after school program if they don't go to school during the day, right? Or at least that should be your rule. If they miss school during the day, their parents better not be dropping them off in the afternoon for you to watch them during the afternoon. They have to be there during the school day for them to participate in the after school program. And so you need to try to figure out what the kids in the kids that you're serving, what they want to do, and try to incorporate those activities into your program so that they want to come. They're going to want to come to you, which is going to make them want to go to school. So try to think outside the box. Don't only have ELA reading and mathematics. Make sure you have some really fun and cool activities. That's one fantastic thing about us giving you guys more money than you've been given in the past, is now you should have more money to buy some of those really cool technology, to really purchase some really interesting and fun things for the kids to do with your program. Some of the things that we have encouraged sites to purchase when they had extra money was things like the Lou interactive system, or I think there's like the Smart Floor system. It's activity based, but also learning based. What else? I've seen people purchase robots that the kids could build. I've seen them do RC remote control, where they build remote control cars or boats or whatever, and then they build it, and then they go and test it, have competitions with each other. There's the esports. At one time when I first started working with 21st Century and saw things about esports, I was like, what is this? And at first, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, this doesn't sound appropriate to me, because basically they were buying video game equipment. And I'm like, why are we buying Xboxes for an after school program? But then I went to the Beyond School Hours conference this past spring, and I went into a presentation about esports, and it won me over. It completely won me over, because the people that are doing this right, they are really, they've got kids that are staying after school because they love video games, but they've turned it more into, it's like a problem solving, team building activities. They have to play the video games as teams. They have team leaders. They have some sort of problem solving that they have to do with their team members. They compete against other schools. They even the Army has an esports Army game truck that they'll bring out to your school, and the kids can compete against soldiers, in the Army with this esport thing. So it's really, really cool. Jennifer just popped up. She's one of our current subgrantees, and asked if she could share something with everyone about esports. And I'm happy for her to do that if I can figure out how to make it where she can talk. Give me a second. The problem with this thing is once I start sharing my screen, it doesn't give me options to all my buttons. Carla, can you make it where Jennifer can talk?
Oh, no. Try to unmute yourself, Jennifer.
There is a company
Yeah.
called Bloom, it state bid list, and they have all of the esports products. I think it's quotes. One of the vendors that his organization offers is Acer, and he was telling me the other day accreditation through their esports program, to where there's full ride scholarship universities throughout, if you get your esports going, and then they carry on into the high school and beyond. So I just wanted to throw that in. Again, that was Bloom Incorporated. Andrew Fristashi is my contact person, and I will drop his or the name of the company and a contact information, because if you're new to esports, and I know a lot of people that may be on this call are new to 21st century in general, but he's got VR goggles, the esports. He has a variety of other platforms and technology that would be available that align with our program goals. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for commenting, Jennifer. Yeah, it's a really cool program that you could incorporate for sure. And I know, I have 3 children, and they are very much into anything that has to do with video games, even though they're all grown now. They still play video games, and this would have been something they would have wanted to stay after school for. So these are the kind of things that we hope to see you guys use your money on, and think about the things that are going to make your kids want to come to your program so that they want to come to school. Same thing with behavior. That's the next focus area. We want to see an increase in positive student behavior. So it could be that you have a regulation in place that they can't participate in the 21st century program if they don't behave at school, but that's probably not the best way to go about it. It may be that if you see that you're serving students that are having continuous behavior issues, maybe you need to spend some of your funding on hiring a counselor of some kind, hiring you could reach out to your community and try to have mentors come in to work directly with the kids, some sort of mentoring program. A lot of local churches have that. Some of the universities have that. Well, they'll have people come in and work one-on-one with the kids. You're welcome to think outside the box to help address that behavior. There could be things that you do with those students during your 21st century program that will definitely positively affect the behavior of the kids during the school day as well. Because another benefit of this is that the people that you have working with these kids, they don't all have to be teachers. I mean, they do need to be teachers in most cases, but they don't have to have that teacher hat on at all times. They can work with those kids to encourage them more. It's more like being the adult. It's more about being the adult that encourages those kids and loves on those kids and gives them fun things to do. It's less about having to worry about testing and data and numbers that sometimes our teachers during the school day have to worry about. After school can be a chance for the kids to have a safe place to go to after school where they feel valued and cared for, and that's going to help. That should help with their behavior during the regular school day as well. And so that's what hopefully we see reflected in the data that's reported to the federal government and to us. The next focus area is holistic health and wellness. This could be a broad range of things. This could be anywhere from nutritional activities It could be physical activities you could incorporate into your program, like dance classes or karate or tennis lessons, anything like that that you can think of that would promote health and wellness with those students. But it also could, again, kind of tie into that behavior aspect. It could also be thinking about things that benefit mental health. So it could be character development activities or, you know, that sort of thing. Your social emotional learning type activities that would fall under holistic health and wellness as well. Those are making sure that your kids are healthy and are both well physically and mentally is also obviously going to affect their academics during the day, their attendance during the day, and their behavior during the day. So that does need to be a focus that we want you to have as part of your program. The next one is service learning. Service learning is a great way to help these kids realize that the world does not revolve around them, right? It helps them figure out ways to be helpful to their community, to their fellow students, gives them a chance to come up with activities that they can do to benefit people in their community or organizations in their community, to do something for somebody else. That obviously could really positively affect some students' lives. And adults are guilty of this too. Sometimes we kind of think within our own, our own experiences, our own houses, our own homes, our own families, and we don't really think about what's going on in the neighborhoods around us or the communities around us. And this kind of helps those kids, gives them the opportunity to do that, to think about someone other than themselves, and think about how they can grow up to be a productive citizen that hopefully is not just wants to be successful themselves, but wants their community and their, wants their school to be successful, their community to be successful, their friends and families to be successful. So that is incorporated into our program as well. And then the final one is parent and family involvement. We talked about earlier how you can do activities that were directly, for those family members, but really when I'm talking about parent and family involvement, I'm really talking about giving those parents and families opportunities to be involved in their children's lives and their learning outside of the home. And so it's inviting parents to come and watch a play that you guys have been working on. It's having an art night. It's having a STEM night where they can come do STEM activities. It could even be things like purchasing kits to send home to families for them to do summer learning. If maybe you're not having a summer program, or maybe you are having a summer program, but it's only going to last like a couple of weeks, and you want something that parents can do with their kids to keep learning loss from happening. That kind of thing. So you can think outside the box with this one too. It could be that you plan a field trip that parents are invited to go to with their kids. There's all different ways that we encourage you to try to increase that parent and family involvement into those students, because we all know that culture and the home is a huge influence on student achievement. And the more involved parents and families are with their students' learning, the more likely those kids are to be successful. And so we encourage you to make sure you're incorporating those type of activities into your programs. Okay, just realized I can't see the chat anymore. So let me go back to where I can see it again. Hold on. Okay. Is math or reading training appropriate for parents? Absolutely. If you want to do something where you're teaching, parents how to read with their kids or how to do math activities with their kids, absolutely. So there's different ways that you could do that. It could just, you still could offer a class just to parents on this where their children aren't necessarily involved in it, but you could offer activities where parents and children are both involved in the activity, and you're doing some training with those parents. So yes, if you see that that's a need, a community need, then absolutely you can incorporate that into your program. Okay, and thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that resource for esports. I'm telling you, I was on fire about it after watching, watching that presentation about, it was another state, but they really taken their esports program in that state to another level, and it was just really, really cool to see. And Jennifer's right, there's all kinds of scholarships and things. I mean, I wish I had known about that because, as much as I complained about my kids playing video games, it sure would have been nice if they had gotten a scholarship, and it could have helped pay for their college. That would have been amazing. Okay, other state level program requirements. So you must establish an advisory council that has to be comprised of students, teachers, parents, and members of your community, agencies, and businesses. So like when I say community agency, I mean like it could be DHR, something like that. And then also you want to have some business members as well as part of your advisory committee. Though your advisory council should meet at least once every 6 months, so basically twice a year. And when you have those meetings, you need to make sure you keep appropriate documentation, which would include sign-in sheets, agendas, and minutes. This is something that we check for when we do your compliance monitoring. So please make sure you are doing this. You can have the meeting as a virtual meeting. You just need to make sure that you have a way for them to sign into the meeting. So it could be that they do it in the chat. As long as you have a way for them to sign in and you've printed that out and you have a copy of that, then you should be fine. But please make sure that you are doing that. Hours of operation. We touched on this a little bit earlier when we talked about your funding, but this is what the hours of operation are according to the RFA. These are like the requirements, are the minimum requirements for your hours of operation. So if you're serving elementary grades K through 5, you're required to be open for a minimum of 10 contact hours Monday through Friday for the entire school year. So you should be doing a program every day if you're elementary for the whole school year, so at least 2 hours a day. You can do more than that, but this is the minimum requirement. If you're serving middle or high school grades, then it's a little bit less of a requirement. You can do a minimum of 6 contact hours at least 4 days a week for the entire school year. So I think the reasoning behind this was that a lot of high schools and middle schools have like sports that were keeping kids from coming like on Thursdays or Fridays. It could be games and things like that. And so this one was, you should be open 4 days a week, at least 6 hours during the week. Again, most of you have planned to provide way more hours than that, but that's just the minimum. We do ask that the days of operation be consistent from week to week. The reason for that, the federal government asks that as well, because you got to realize that you're keeping these kids after school. And so the parents, once they've signed their children up for your program, they become dependent on your program, and maybe the parents have to work or something like that. And so you want to try to make sure you're being consistent each week and offering that activity or offering your 21st century program, because it really does mess up your parents if you have to cancel or if you change your hours from week to week. It messes with their work schedules and things like that. So try to be consistent. I was thinking about saying something. I'm gonna wait on that. Okay, anyway. Yeah, anyway, never mind. So, well, let me go ahead and say this. If you know that you need to be closed on a certain day for some reason, you need to make your parents aware of that as soon as possible. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Probably shouldn't, because I haven't spoken with my boss yet, but one of the things that we would like to see happen is we have the ACEA conference each year. In the past, it's been a required conference that we ask administrators to go to, but we did not do that this year because we're hoping this year that ACEA will be more focused on staff, the people that work directly with the students. One of my complaints that I've noticed over the past year is we tend to provide a lot of professional development for our site coordinators and our program directors, but we really don't provide a lot for the actual people that work directly with the students on a day-to-day basis. We hope that trainees get turned around to those staff, but we know that it doesn't always happen. And there's all kinds of reasons why staff may not be able to participate. So I haven't run this past my boss yet, but I am leaning towards allowing sites to shut their program down for a few days in order for their staff to attend ACEA, because we're hoping it's going to be really good information that will apply to site staff. And I'm going to try to speak with her about that as soon as possible so that we can let you guys know before your school year starts. Because if we're going to do that, if we're going to allow you to do that, we want you to go ahead and let the parents know from day one of the program starting. We know that this is something that preschool does. The preschool program, they have a certain week each year that their preschool teachers are out for professional development. And so they tell the parents right from the get-go that on this date, these certain days, our program is not going to be open, so the parents can plan for babysitters or whatever they need to plan for. And so we may do the same sort of thing for 21st century. So we're leaning towards that. But again, I have not ran that past my box yet to make sure it's something that we can officially say is something that you're going to be able to do. I think she'll be okay with it, but I just have to check with her. But my point in this was that keep your parents in mind and make sure that if you do have a programmatic change, that it's not going to be something that's going to put a burden on your parents. Because if that happens, they're more likely to pull their child from your program and maybe not let them back in later on. And so try not to do that. So if you know for sure that you're going to have to be shut down for something during the school year, try your best to make the parents aware of that from the beginning of the school year so that they are prepared to find an alternative place for those kids to go in the afternoon if they're working or something like that. And as soon as I get the go-ahead from Dr. Killingsworth, I will let you guys know if that's something that we can allow you guys to shut down for professional development, for that professional development opportunity. Okay. The other thing I want to point out to you is you can operate your program for a maximum of 30 minutes before school starts each day, but that 30 minutes can't count towards your program hours, your overall program hours. It would just have to be additional. So just keep that in mind. The before school hours must be in addition to your required hours after school. And then also same thing with Saturday activities. You can do activities on Saturdays, but they must not take the place of the required hours for after school programming after school. So let's say you're taking a field trip on a Saturday during a school year, just because you're taking that and you say the kids, your field trip is going to take 5 hours. If you're doing that on a Saturday, that doesn't mean that you can cut 5 hours from your after school program the week before that. You need to be prepared, to pay your staff that extra money for them to, go on the field trip or whatever, but you can't cut your other program hours to make up for that. Another thing I just want to throw out there to you that's a possibility in case this happens to any of you and it's a need in your community. You can run your 21st century program anytime the school is not in session. So this would also apply to emergency situations. And the way I found out about this was I was at a national 21st century director meeting, and there were people there from South Carolina who had schools that had been shut down due to the massive flooding that they had this past year. You know, a lot of schools, a lot of communities were wiped out by the flooding, including schools and things like that. And so they allowed their 21st century programs, if they had a building that wasn't affected by the flood, they allowed them to bring those kids in during what would typically be a school day time because their school had been shut down. So that was really helpful to their community because they had kids that were living in tents, their homes had been wiped out, their school had been wiped out, but yet for some reason, whatever reason, that 21st century community center was in a building that wasn't affected. And so they were able to run their program during the day so that the families had somewhere to take their kids during the day and have a safe place for them to be while they were cleaning up with this mess at home, you know, trying to figure out what's going on in their homes. And so if something like that ever happens here in Alabama, let's say this is Tornado Alley. We have a tornado that comes through and damages a school, and that school has to shut down for a week or two, and there's another place that could potentially host your 21st century program, then that would be a possibility. You would just need to run it past you would need to ask for permission, of course, with us at the State Department of Education, but that would be something that we might potentially be able to approve for you to host those kids during what would typically be considered a school day, but it would be during a time when their school is shut down for some reason. Okay. Just a little bit more for today, and then we're done. We're going to talk about field trips. So, field trips you are allowed to do field trips with your students, and we're going to focus on all the rules and regulations around field trips. That's probably the last thing that we're going to be able to talk about today before we have to move on. But keep in mind that field trips should be connected to the academic or enrichment program and provide an educational experience for students to grow academically or culturally. What I like to say to the 21st century sites is you should base your field trip off of your academic program or off of your enrichment program, not base your enrichment program off of the field trip you want to take. Okay. So a lot of times field trips is an issue more during the summer than it is during the school year because you can't take a field trip during school hours. I think less sites actually do field trips during the school years, or if they do, they just do a small field trip. It's not something that's big. It may be something that's like an hour away or something like that, but nothing major. Most of our larger field trips happen during summer programming. Again, I'm going to make sure that these slides you're given access to these slides, but these are all links to various templates and forms that have to be submitted when you want to do field trips with your students. There's also some guidelines here. There's an approved field trip list that you can look at. This has a list of locations that are already kind of like, you still have to submit a field trip submission form, but if where you're going is on this approved field trip list, then it shouldn't be any problem getting it approved. All of these are going to be, everything that's on the approved field trip list should be known educational type venues like the McWane Center or a museum. It could be, why am I drawing a blank? It could be a university. There's all kinds of venues across the state that the purpose of them is for kids to learn something or for people to learn something when they go there. And so those are on the approved field trip list. So if you want to access any of these forms, you can use these links, but you can also find them on the 21st Century website, which we will go over with you at some point during one of these trainings. All right, so when you plan field trips, we really want to see those field trips have some sort of educational or academic purpose. They need to be STEM related, or maybe they could be, these are just examples. It could be related to financial literacy. So maybe you're going to take the kids to a local bank to teach them about how to open a checking account or something like that. They could promote parental involvement. They could have something to do with physical fitness, health, or wellness. Serve your service learning project. I saw, someone recently applied. They had a field trip that was based on their service learning project. So they were doing a field trip to a local fire station because their service learning project was something that they were doing for firemen. That would be fine. It could be something cultural. Those are all approved type topics that we would like to see your field trips being related to. Go to the next slide. Okay, so let's go over some of these rules and regulations before we get into the nitty-gritty part. Field trips are not permissible during the regular school hours. So during the school year, you can't take a field trip during school hours, okay? Field trips are only for students registered for 21st century programs. So this has been an issue, or this has come up in cases, for example, like during the summer, if let's say that we didn't have a situation where we had a situation where there was 2 different camps going on at one school. One was for, let's say, the reading initiative, and one was 21st century, and they weren't working together. They, the kids that were going to the reading initiative camp don't do anything 21st century during the normal day, but all of a sudden they expect 21st century to take their students to on a field trip. That's not allowed, right? Now, if you're working together, like I talked to you about earlier, and you're braiding the funds together, and those kids are doing other 21st century activities, and they are considered 21st century students in addition to being the literacy camp kids, so they're both participating in literacy activities and 21st century activities during the week, then yes, they can go on that 21st century field trip because they are a 21st century student. But you can't just all of a sudden ask that students be allowed to attend a field trip and paid for with 21st century funds if they're not involved in the 21st century program in any other way. So that would be a no. Sorry. Okay, subgrantees are allowed 1 field trip each semester during the academic school year for each site. And for summer programs, subgrantees are allowed 1 field trip per week. So again, summer tends to be when we have most of our field trips taking place. I do want to say this though, for summer programming, if you're taking, I think in the past, we've had situations where we expected you guys to get permission for any time you left the building. We considered that a field trip. But this year, I've basically said, if the kids are walking somewhere within the community that's like really close by, I don't think that that's a field trip. Okay. So for example, if you're taking the kids, if you're doing a summer program and then twice a week, your students walk to the library, which is like 2 blocks over from the school, that's not a field trip. Do you need to get permission slips signed by parents saying it's okay for their child to walk to the library? Absolutely. Did the parents need to know that the child is going to leave that 21st century building that day? Absolutely. But do you have to submit that to the ALSDE or your technical assistant to have that approved when it's like part of your regular program? No, we're not going to ask you to do that. Your parents need to be aware if the kids are leaving the building. Your school principal needs to be aware if the kids are leaving the program. I mean, leaving the school building. But if it's just a quick walk over like 2 blocks to the local library, that's not really, I don't consider that a field trip. Same thing, same situation if some of our summer programs offer swim lessons at the local YMCA, and they do it several times a week. They don't have to submit something to us for every one of those times they want to take those kids to the local YMCA for their swimming lessons. even if they have to take a bus over to the YMCA, it's in the community, it's part of their summer programming. Yes, they do definitely need to make sure that they have permission slips signed from the parents, that the parents know that the kids are going to be put into a pool, and they're comfortable with that, and that they're going for swimming lessons, they're leaving the building. They need, the parents, of course, need to know that. The principal of the school needs to know that. But do you have to submit that to us and get it approved? No. A field trip is more when you're going outside of the community, going somewhere that's, 20 to 30 minutes away, up to hours away, to go to a venue that is outside of the normal. It's not part of your regular programming. That's what I consider a field trip. If you're uncertain of what you're wanting to do would fall into that, just ask. Just say, hey, we're doing this once a week. Do we need to fill out the field trip form for that? And we'll let you know. We'll consider it we'll take into consideration the situation and let you know if that's something that we would consider a field trip. Okay. Any questions about that? Just let me know. If we're looking to put into the chat. T-shirts can be purchased, and we actually encourage you to do this, can be purchased for safety reasons for the students, so that all of your students look the same and they're all wearing the same T-shirt, so that when you go into a crowded area, you can tell which kids are yours. What we do, the rules for this though are that if you purchase T-shirts solely for the purpose of 21st century field trips, those T-shirts are really not supposed to go home with the students. They're supposed to remain at the school and remain property of the 21st century program. Also, those T-shirts, if you're having like the school logo or anything put on the T-shirts, it also has to include the 21st century logo, and that logo needs to be bigger than any other logo on the shirt. Okay. So this created quite an uproar. The last time we talked about this at I think it was ACEA, actually, we talked about this, and there was an uproar about the logo. There was an uproar about not getting to send the shirts home with the parents. Here's the thing. The T-shirts are being purchased with 21st century funds. The federal government says the 21st century logo should be the main logo, then that's what the main logo needs to be. Can you put other logos on the shirt? Absolutely. You have sponsors that are sponsoring the trip or whatever. Can you put their logo on there too? Sure. Just make sure the 21st century logo is the bigger logo. As far as cleaning the shirts, that was another big uproar. Well, can we buy a washing machine? Can we do this to wash the shirts? There was all kinds of questions about that. Technically, I guess you could, but you can't use 21st century funds to put in the water water hookups that would be required for that washing machine, any kind of electrical outlets that would need to be installed for that. So probably that would not be very feasible. You can't do any kind of upgrades to a building or any permanent kind of changes to a building with 21st century funds. What we recommend you doing is, a lot of schools have a washing machine somewhere in the school. It could be with like a home ec class. It could be with the athletics program. You could try to see if you could use their washing machine. Or you may just have a nice, good, kind-hearted person that works for your program that's willing to take those kids' shirts home and wash them in the washing machine and bring them back. Okay? That's what I would hope you would have happen, that maybe your site coordinator or one of your teachers would be willing to wash those shirts. I don't know. We could carry this to all kinds, you could really make a big deal out of this, but to me, it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. Now, what you could do, and I gave this as an example, we're not supposed to let you purchase clothing for kids to take home and keep with 21st century funds. However, you can purchase a shirt and allow kids to do some sort of art activity, or we have some programs that have like a kits where the kids can design their own logo and have it applied to the shirt. They have like the presses and things like that. And that is a enrichment activity. That could be considered an enrichment activity, and you could let the kids keep the shirt if that was the case. So one thing you could possibly do is you could purchase a white plain t-shirt, have the 21st Century logo put on it, and then do a tie-dye activity. Let the kids tie-dye their own shirts. And then that could be considered an art activity, an enrichment activity, and that could be something the kid could take home with them. Just understand though, that if you expect them to come back, you may not want to do that. You may want to keep the shirts on site, because what happens when the next field trip rolls around and mama can't find that shirt? It's gotten lost and you don't have access to it anymore. And now you've already bought the shirt, so you don't have time to buy another one. So it really is best to try to keep those shirts on site if you can at all possible, especially if you're going to do multiple field trips throughout your year or throughout the summer. It's just really best to try to keep those shirts on site. Another thing I want to say about field trips is talking about your EGAP budget. What we've been asking sites to do in the EGAP application, when your application is reviewed by your ALSDE specialist, they may ask you to change something in your application in regards to field trips. What we've been trying to tell people is, please don't put the location of where your field trips are going to be in your EGAP narrative, because if you list something that's questionable as to whether it's allowable or not, we're going to ask you to remove it. We're going to have to send your application back and ask you to remove that place. So what I've told the specialists for the current applications that you guys have already put in, if you only have locations currently that are listed that are on that approved field trip list, then they can just leave it. It's fine. It's good to go. But if you have a location that you say you're going to take a field trip to, that's to a place that is questionable. For example, maybe a place that's considered usually just for entertainment, like an amusement park or a jump park or an arcade type place, then we're going to ask you to remove it from your EGAP application, because we don't want anyone to say, well, you approved it my EGAP application, so I thought it was okay for me to take the kids there. We have another system for you to get field trips approved. And so the best thing for you to put in your EGAP budget application in the narrative is just say, these funds are going to go towards ALSDE approved field trips. And then we will approve the location when you submit those field trip requests. So I just realized I skipped that part. So this bullet here, the fourth one down, there are certain times of the year that we will ask you to submit what field trips you plan to take in the future. So for semester one, for August through any field trips you plan to take August through December, you have to submit that field trip for approval by August 15th. You might need to make that date earlier, but I doubt anybody's taking a field trip the first 2 weeks of school. So we'll probably just leave it the way it is. But you would need to submit your request or approval for your field trip by August 15th if you plan to take one first semester. If you plan to take a field trip with your students second semester, which would be January through May, then you would need to submit an approval form by January 15th. Okay. If you forget to submit these approval forms, you are not allowed to take the field trip during those time periods. Okay. If it's a day late, we're not going to approve it. Okay. We're trying to be more, trying to be less flexible about this, because we do have some sites who tend to turn things in late on a regular basis, and it causes frustration for everybody involved, and so we're just going to stick to these dates and try not to allow anything that goes past this date. Biggest one that most of you have to worry about is the summer one. Because like I said, most field trips occur during the summer. And so you need to make sure you submit all of your field trip requests for the summer by May 15th. We want you to submit them all at one time so that we can kind of see all the field trips that you plan to have together, instead of letting them trickle in one at a time. We would like to see what all you're planning on doing with those students. Okay, so you have a question about semester field trip when appropriate. Go ahead. What is that question? Can you unmute yourself?
Ma'am,
Oh,
can you
yes,
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My question is, hypothetically, and I'm new to all this, but let's say that we wanted to try to do something nearby because, the time constraints are different after school hours versus the summer. And we wanted to take advantage of the one field trip per semester that's allowed. But the place that's might be accommodating us can't accommodate all the students that we would have. So they may say, we can take so many kids on Monday and then you're going to have to bring the rest a different day or the next week or whatever. Would that still count as the one field trip?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
yes to that. You just need to make sure you explain that.
Okay.
Anytime there's something like that, just make sure that when you're submitting your application for it, that you explain, I'm going to take half the kids on one day and the other half of the kids on another day, because the venue can't hold all those kids, at one time.
Okay.
And that's to me,
It
that's
still counts as
perfectly
one field
justifiable.
trip. Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be considered more than one, no, because you're,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was a great question. Okay, so let's talk about what's not allowed for these field trips. Field trips that are for entertainment purposes, such as amusement parks. So when I went to the last Bruman conference, that's that law firm I was telling you about that knows all things about federal programs. It's not a 21st century conference. It's just any kind of federal program conference. There was a session about states who have had findings, and one of the things that they mentioned was a 21st century program getting a finding or getting, written up basically for allowing field trips to an amusement park, even with a lesson plan attached to it. So my first initial reaction was, okay, that's it, no more. If it's to a place that's typically for amusement, we're just not going to accept it anymore. I don't care if they've got a good lesson plan or not. I don't want to risk getting in trouble with my boss by allowing things that I know could get us in trouble. But then Alicia, with her sweet self, talked me into reconsidering, because she was saying, a lot of these kids may never have the opportunity to even go anywhere outside of their communities. This might be their only chance to get to go to a place like that. Sometimes they really do you guys have a really good lesson plan to go with it. And it actually is truly an educational opportunity. And so she talked me into reconsidering. So this is what we settled on. If you want to take a field trip to a place that is typically for the purpose of entertainment, and I'm talking about amusement parks, I'm talking about arcades, I'm talking about jump parks. That's a big one. No, don't ask to go to a jump park for physical activity. That's going to be a no. Even I know it's physical activity. I know the kids are jumping on trampolines, but that's not they can do physical activity at the site. That's not a justifiable reason to take a field trip. If you want to take a field trip to a place like that, you better have an amazing lesson plan to go with that trip. And that lesson plan must include some sort of product that the kids are going to create when they come back from the field trip. So they're going to make a poster, they're going to build a model, they're going to do some kind of physical activity they're not going to make a journal entry. They're not going to have a class discussion. They're going to create some sort of actual physical product after going on that trip. And you are going to document it. You're going to take pictures. You're going to keep student samples. And we're going to ask to see those afterwards. We're going to send the TAs to ask to see it. We're going to ask to see it. We're going to make sure that you did what you said you were going to do. Because if the feds come to me and try to write me up for allowing you to go on that field trip, I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row and I have all my documentation to say, do you see this? This was very educational. They came up with a great lesson plan. The kids learned a lot. They created this when they got back. And I want to make sure that, that I've got you guys covered. I've got me covered, and that we're not approving things that's going to be, that is going to get any of us in trouble. So let me give you an example of that. We had a site, and I have no idea off the top of my head what site it was, but Carla was telling me about it. That's one of our specialists, and they wanted to take their kids to a Braves game, a Braves game. And typically you could say that could be applied to your holistic health and wellness, because, baseball is a physical activity. I get that. But nothing that program had been doing throughout the year had anything to do with baseball. They don't have like baseball lessons as an enrichment in the afternoon. They don't have a baseball team that, you know what I mean? Like that was not a focus of their program. If they did have like some sort of retired professional baseball player coming in and teaching kids how to hit the ball or how to catch or something like that, and they were doing some sort of enrichment that had to do with baseball, that would be one thing. But they didn't have anything like that. They just wanted to take the kids to a baseball game. Well, at first the answer was no. This is not going to be an allowable activity. But then Carla encouraged them to try to come up with ways to make it an enrichment activity that would apply to something that they've been doing with their 21st century program. And she also encouraged them to have AI help them come up with it. So they put in some things that they had been working on. They put into an AI app some things that they had been working on with their 21st century program. So they wanted to go to a baseball game, asked the AI app to help them come up with an educational activity that could be done at the game and after the game if they did this as a field trip. And sure enough, it created an amazing lesson plan. So basically, with mathematics, they went to the game, they kept the score of the game, and they did a statistics activity while they were at the game. And then when they came back, they did an additional activity where they took different baseball players' baseball cards and used their stats that were on the baseball cards to do some different math activities and different statistics activities. And it was fantastic. And so once they had submitted that, it was approved. So keep things like that in mind. Again, we don't want you to come up with where you want to go and then try to come up with an activity to allow you to go there. We would really much rather you try to think of places to take field trips on based on what you've been teaching the kids and talking about in your program. But if you need help, use AI as let it help you come up with a really good lesson plan so that you can get your field trip activity approved. Okay. Okay. So here's another thing that you're not allowed to do. We're not allowed, and I know we're going over time, and I apologize. I am still recording this. If you have to leave, please feel free to do so. I just want to finish out talking about field trips. I don't want to stop right in the middle. I'll try to hurry though. If you cannot ask the request part of the field trip payment to be provided by the students or the parents. So you can't ask the parents to pay for food or the families to pay for food. You can't ask them to pay for any part of their tickets into the trip. You're not allowed to ask students to pay for anything when it comes to 21st century, or their families to pay for anything when it comes to 21st century. So that is not allowable. Okay. Now, in the past, this is new, and this is going to be something that you guys are kind of hearing even before some of our current cohorts are hearing it, because I just got this approved from Dr. Killingsworth like earlier this week or late last week. I can't remember which. But under some circumstances, you can pay for food for your field trip. if you are taking kids on a, I cannot answer, I'm sorry, guys. Sorry. If you're taking kids on a field trip that is going to be extensive and you're going to be traveling during hours that would typically be times when kids would eat, like a meal, whether it be breakfast, lunch, or whatever, or maybe even if, they've had breakfast and lunch, but you're traveling in the afternoon for like longer than 4 hours or something, and they need a snack, then you could potentially use 21st Century funds to pay for that food. Now, what we encourage you to do is try to find a sponsor first to pay for the food, if at all possible. Another option that we ask you to do before you spend 21st Century is to try to work with your CMP program, your child nutrition program, to see if they could maybe provide a packed lunch or something like that for your 21st Century program. But that doesn't always work out. So I had a 21st Century program contact me this past week. I actually got to call her back and say that they have a child nutrition program in their LEA that they're using to provide food for students on Monday through Thursday, but the child nutrition program is not open on Fridays. They're just not doing that. I don't know if it's a staffing issue, but we can't force child nutrition to stay open during the summer. There are some LEAs that don't have child nutrition programs at all during the summer, and that's their prerogative to do that, okay? So the issue is that when they take their Friday field trip, they were taking these kids on a longer distance field trip. And I think at the time, the CMP program told them they could pack a lunch for them, but they would have to feed that lunch to the kids by a certain time, and it just wasn't gonna work out. Plus, they would have to figure out a way to store the food and keep it cold. They'd have to have coolers to put the food into and that sort of thing, and it just wasn't working out. And then after that, they weren't willing to do it in the future. They weren't going to do it again. And so they asked, can we use 21st Century funds to feed the kids? We don't have any other way to feed them other than this. And so I approached Dr. Killingsworth with this, and she agreed that this would be a justifiable reason to allow 21st Century funds to be spent on food, as long as I put a method in place to make sure that it was necessary and reasonable, and that it had to be approved by the ALSDE. All right, so hi Cynthia. So this actually applies to you because you're one of the people I need to call about this. So what we have decided is that if you have a justifiable reason to purchase food for students during a field trip, you can do that, but you have to have it approved first through the ALSDE. So for right now, we're just asking you to submit a plan. I have that on one of these slides, I think. Hold on. I'm actually going to skip a couple of slides and then I'll come back. Where is it? Okay, here we go. I'll go back to those other slides in a minute. But if you'll look down at the bottom of this, if you want to purchase food for a field trip, you must first attempt to have the food provided by child nutrition or a sponsor. If that doesn't work out, then you can submit a proposal to me or your ALSDE specialist, which includes a plan of where the food is going to be purchased, the cost of each meal, and you need to be able to show that the amount that you're wanting to spend on that food is reasonable and necessary. Someone asked about, I don't know if it's the same person I spoke to last week, but somebody asked about this again yesterday, and they asked if there was going to be a cap on the amount that would be approved. And I don't want to do that because I know in some situations, like for example, if I had to pick a cap right now, just off the top of my head, I might say, okay, you don't need to spend more than $10 per student. But what if the only option, the only feasible option to provide food for those kids in the area where you're going to be is $12 per student? I don't want, if that's the case, I want you to be able to say, we would like to spend $12 per student, and this is the reasons why. We contacted multiple restaurants. This is the best price we could find, or this is the only restaurant that's within a 30-mile radius of the venue. Something to that effect. Give me the reason why this is the amount that you need to spend on those students to feed them. Of course, we want you to try to be as reasonable as possible. If it's a field trip where you're traveling and you need to stop en route to the place you're going, you could say something like, we're going to stop at the Oxford exit. There's a McDonald's, there's a Chick-fil-A. We are going to give children the option of which one they want to go to. We're going to purchase the child's meal, a children's meal for each student. Those children's meals will not exceed the cost of $6 per child, that type of thing. There are some venues that have a ticket that they offer that includes the cost of food in the ticket. If that's the case, if that's what you're wanting to do, so I believe like McWayne Center would be an example of that. I believe that they have a ticket for admission, and then they have a ticket for admission that includes a meal with it. If that's what makes the most sense, then just explain that you want to purchase the ticket that includes the meal. Now, that I think is a reasonable cost. If for some reason you're wanting to take kids to Disney World, which that's just what I'm throwing out there, their ticket that includes a meal probably is not reasonable, because I have bought the meal plan for my children to Disney World before, and it's like $100 per child per day. That's not reasonable. So, if you can show that it's a reasonable and necessary cost, you just have to put that into your proposal. And we may ask questions. We may ask you to provide us more details, but once you've done that, we'll approve it or not, and then we'll make sure that you've uploaded that into EGAP so that it is part of your application, so that we can show that you had a justifiable reason for spending 21st century money on food. This doesn't just apply to field trips, so we'll talk about other ways you can purchase food now, or other reasons at another training, because I've got to get this finished up. I know y'all ready to go. Okay, so let me go back to these and go through these slides as quickly as I can, and then I'll give you a chance to ask some questions. Because we're past the time, though, I do want to go ahead and say this in case any of you need to go ahead and leave. Please, when you leave or before you leave, please go back to that. Okay, we're on slide 25 now. Please go back to this spreadsheet. Use the QR code here to fill out this form again, so that this is your way of signing out of the meeting. So when we go in to check for your attendance, we're going to check to see that you've done this twice, that you've filled this form out 2 times. Once when you came into the meeting, once when you left the meeting, and that way we know you were here for the entire thing. So please make sure that either you take the time now to scan it really quick, or I'll go ahead and put the link again in the chat. But just whenever you leave the meeting, please go ahead and submit that form again, so that we have record of your attendance for this required meeting. Okay. So there's the link in the chat, and I'm going back to slide 25 really fast and try to cover this last few things really quickly. When you do your lesson plans, you need to include of course, your sub-grantee name, your site, the location of the trip that includes the complete address of where you're going. I don't really know why this is on here twice. The field trip destination, departure and return time, the date of your field trip, the mode of transportation, whether you're taking the public school bus or whether you're chartering a bus. I highly encourage you to charter a bus if you can afford to do so, especially for longer trips, because, kids have to go to the bathroom, and a lot of those charter buses have a bathroom on them. You need to explain how this trip meets one of the goals included in your grant application. It needs to have an agenda, which includes a timeline of the activities you're going to be doing during the trip, include the time you leave school and the time you plan to arrive back at school. You need to include your educational prep, what you're going to do leading up to the trip. So what lessons are you going to do prior to the trip so the kids are ready for it? Somebody at the last meeting mentioned like a civil rights museum. If you're going to take kids to a civil rights museum, you guys need to be talking about civil rights before you go to the museum so the kids understand why they're there. You need to be talking about why you're going on this field trip and prepare the kids for it and do some sort of activities leading up to the field trip so that the kids know why they're going on this field trip and what it is that they're expected to learn from the trip. You need to include your Alabama learning standards that you plan to meet by going on this trip. So there needs to be some sort of standard, whether it's a math standard, a reading standard, English language arts, a science standard, something. There needs to be an Alabama standard for each grade level that's going on the trip that you plan to meet by going on this trip. And then there needs to be some sort of follow-up assessment or activity that is more than just a discussion or journaling. There needs to be some sort of product after the trip. We also ask for you to complete a field trip submission log, which again includes the destination and address, the date, month, day, and year of the trip, departure and return time, the number of kids you plan to take, the number of adults you plan to take. Please make sure you follow your LEA guidelines for this. If you are an LEA, if you're a CBO and you don't have guidelines for field trips, you need to create some guidelines. What the approximate round trip mileage is going to be, whether it's include any, if you're taking multiple stops, the approximate cost to be charged to the 21st Century Grant that includes all of your costs. So that would be the cost of transportation, the cost of mileage, the cost of food if you plan to buy that, the cost of the tickets, the cost of paying your staff to go, or whatever, whatever costs are involved with that field trip, everything needs to be included. Please make sure, again, you follow your LEA's field trip policies. You have parents fill out permission slips. You use your school system permission slips if needed, or you can create your own, but make sure it has everything that your LEA requires. And again, if you're a CBO, you need to create some field trip permission slips that include everything. If you might want to include in that any kind of health insurance information on the students that could be included. Of course, emergency contact information for the parents or the family of the student, that sort of thing. You need to make sure that you obtain permission from your school system before you go on this trip. Make sure that the principal of the school is informed about the trip and knows that you're going to be gone. It would be horrible if you took kids on a long distance trip and a parent tried to call the school to find out something. Maybe there was an emergency and the principal has no idea that you guys are even gone. They need to be made aware. And of course, send those permission slips to parents that explain the purpose and the details of the trip and make sure they've signed those. This again is the budget. It's basically the same as what I just mentioned a minute ago. Make sure that you're considering all the different funding that could go into the field trip. This is just a copy of the field trip approval form. And okay, so last thing, if TAs, if you're taking the trip to one of the sites that's on the approved field trip list that's in state, then you're going to submit it to the technical assistants will approve it. Typically, we have one place for you to submit all field trip requests. The TPI manages that location, and then they will send the ones that TAs need to approve to your TA, and they'll send the ones that ALSDE needs to approve to ALSDE. ALSDE has to approve any kind of field trips that are out of state or overnight or to a location that's not on the approved field trip list. We would also need to approve any trips involving the purchase of food. And I've already gone over these last two bullets. And that's the last thing I'm going to talk about today, and we will pick up in the next meeting. So
Amanda.
if anyone has any questions, I will stay on for another, 10, 15 minutes if you need me to. It doesn't have to be about what we talked about today. If you have any other questions, programmatic questions that are kind of burning with you right now that you want to go ahead and ask, you don't want to wait until the future trainings to find out, please feel free to put it into the chat.
Amanda,
Again,
that link
don't
that
forget
I
to sign
added,
out. Huh?
the link that I added right there is for the contacts for cohort 26. Erica had to step away,
Okay.
but she wanted everyone to put their information into that link.
Yes. So if you have not sent Erica, if you have not sent TPI or Erica Rucker your contact information yet, if you've not filled out this cohort 26 contact form, please click on this link and do that, so that we will have everybody's contact information.
Is that something that the district coordinator would have already done, or should I assume that she is not and go ahead and do it?
If you're not sure, I would just go ahead and do it.
Okay.
It's better for you to be in there twice than not be in there at all.
Okay. Got you.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all you guys and see if anybody has anything. Okay, great question. So somebody's asking about Mega. So let me talk about that first, and then I'll address the next question. So at Mega, as you all know, it was in the RFA that attending Mega is a requirement of all program directors and site coordinators. We also encourage you to bring anybody that, any other administrative staff that works with 21st Century on an admin level. So if you're hiring if you're having somebody that is going to be over your data collection or over your funding, we also encourage you to bring them as well. But it's a requirement for program directors and site coordinators for cohort 26. The only day that's absolutely required is the 17th of July, July 17th. That's a Thursday of Mega. That is when we have all day sessions with you guys on that day. The way we have decided to handle this is we've got 2 sessions that everybody's going to go through those 2 sessions, but you're going to do it at a different time based on whether you're a program director or a site coordinator. So one of the sessions that's going to last half a day long is going to be ran by TPI and Easy Reports. We actually have people coming from the Easy Report system to go over the Easy Reports with you slowly and carefully. In the past, we've had complaints about how our Easy Reports training is often kind of shoved into like an hour-long training, and it's too fast for some people. Some of the people that work for Easy Reports have kind of a heavy accent, maybe a little bit difficult to understand sometimes. And so what we wanted to do was to give you some one-on-one time with the people from Easy Reports where they could slowly walk everyone through Easy Reports. We ask you to bring your laptops so that you can log into Easy Reports and start kind of working on building out your sites and your activities and things like that during this training. One thing that was explained to me was that what program directors do in Easy Reports may be different than what a site coordinator does in Easy Reports. So we're separating you guys out. So I can't remember which one is which, but and we'll just say it may be opposite of this, but let's just say if I have program directors going to Easy Reports during the morning session, then during that time, the site coordinators will be in a different room with ALSDE staff going over a different training to help you prepare for the new school year. And then you'll go to lunch and y'all will you'll swap. You'll swap. So then after that, the site coordinators will go into the Easy Reports training and get training specific to the needs of site coordinators, while the program directors come to the ALSDE training and get specific information that's needed by program directors from the ALSDE. So everybody's going to be going to training all day long that day. It's just you're going to be divided up. Your program directors are going to be in one place while your site coordinators are going to be in another. Now, if you have other staff coming that is not a site coordinator or a program director, you can choose which one you feel like they need to go with. So for example, if you have data entry people that work more at a site level, then they might want to go with the site coordinators. If you have funding people that work more at a sub-grantee level or like a program director level, because they handle all the funding, for all the grants, they probably want to go with the program directors. So you can choose which one you want, but they just need to go to one or the other and then swap over halfway through. There are other sessions during the week. If you, we encouraged everybody to come to the entire mega program. On Friday, I can tell you that we also have 2 sessions with Easy Reports where it's not necessarily a presentation that they're going to be giving, but they're going to be there to work with sites directly one-on-one who need help setting up their programs. Highly recommend you go to one of these if you can. So it'll be in the agenda in the app, and we'll have them, they'll do it both for the 2 morning sessions that occur on Friday. You can go to either one you want to, and then the TPI staff will be in there and the Easy Report staff members, and they can actually sit down with you and help you set up your program for the new school year, which if you've never done that before, highly recommend you try to do that because it can be kind of confusing to set up. Because I watched them help out the Cohort 25 summer group, and I was like, ooh, this is confusing. So highly recommend that you do that if you can. And then we'll send out recommendations of some other sessions you might want to attend throughout the week that we feel like would apply to you. Of course, you can go to any of the sessions you want to during the week, other than on Thursday. There's certain ones you have to go to. But if you come on Monday and you're going to be there Tuesday and Wednesday, then we are going to kind of provide for you a list of some sessions that might help you out in figuring out where you want to go for the rest of the time that you're there. Some things that might apply to the work that you guys do. And we'll be sending that out. I'm not sure if I'll have time to give it to you this week, but I'll try to have it to you, have that list sent out to you by the end of next week, so that you can kind of help you prepare what sessions you want to go to. Okay, so hopefully that answered your questions about Mega. Did you say that when pre-grant funds would be available to spend? I was thinking I would get my materials and equipment ordered in July. Okay, so this is something we went over at the beginning. And I can go over that again, but before I do that, let me see if anybody else has any questions since we already talked about that. Anyone else have any questions they want me to address first before I talk about the funding again? Okay. So again, here's the deal with the funding. I don't want to go into all the details. You're welcome to go back and watch the beginning of the presentation. We'll make sure the recording gets sent out. But basically, how this is going to work is dependent on whether your site currently has a Cohort 16 grant or not. If the site currently has a Cohort 16 grant, then you're expected just to continue to spend out your current funding through September 30th. If you need additional funds to help you get through September 30th, so like maybe when you did your budget for this year, you weren't thinking about money that you would need to get you started for the next year because you thought maybe you'd have, these other funds. If you need us to add some funding to your grant, then we need you to go in and fill out a form. I sent it to you guys in an email. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure, but I'll make sure I resend that email to you all again. But I need you to let me know how much more money you might need, and we can provide that to you kind of as a supplemental grant to help you get through the rest of the year. And that's all you guys have to do. If you're a new school that doesn't currently have Cohort 16 funding, then we're going to have to do yours in a different way. I don't want to go through all the background information again because it takes me 20 minutes or so to explain, but basically what it is because because you filled out your EGAP application under 2026, you don't have access. We cannot provide you access or reimbursement to funds prior to October 1st, because that's when the FY26 fiscal year begins. We were hoping that it was going to be changed to begin earlier, but it wasn't. And so, so now we're having to do something different to give you access to some funds out of 2025 funding. So we currently have another simple EGAP application being built for you guys in the 2025 funding year. I don't know how long it's going to take for IT to build it. They've told us they'll have it to us before September. I'm hoping it'll be to us way before then. But we again need you to submit a form, and I can go, let me go see if I can find it and repost it for you guys.
Miss Amanda,
Yes.
I submitted that form.
Oh, okay.
I missed, and I just was wanting to know if I could move forward with going ahead and making my purchases in July, or if I would need to wait and get some kind of approval from y'all to start spending money.
Yeah, give me a week. I asked that those forms be submitted by Friday, so I will look at them first thing Monday and reply. Since you're one of the is it for one of your current sites, or do you have a new site?
I have just one new site, Meek Elementary, and so
Okay.
they were they've not had a grant.
I gotcha. So you'll have to do that FY25 thing. More than likely, it's going to be approved. Because we're just going to ask you to let us know how much money you need. So yes, it should be fine for you to go ahead and start spending money after July 1st.
Okay, great. Well, I went ahead and submitted that. I
Okay,
pulled my
great.
budget together like while we were in the. I was in the morning meeting and the afternoon, so thank you. That
Okay,
answered
okay,
the
good.
question.
Okay, so I don't
Yeah.
need to keep it. Was there anybody else who didn't hear that conversation, needs me to go over it? Because I don't know about y'all, but I've been talking all day long and my throat is killing me. So I don't want to explain it again unless I have to. So that's good. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for today, but I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer in case anybody else has any questions. But our next meeting, before I stop the recording, our next meeting is next Monday from 1 to 4. Unfortunately, my schedule did not permit me to offer 2 sessions that day, so it's only going to be the 1 session. Please make every effort to be there. Please know that we need you to be signing in and signing out of these sessions, because these are mandatory for you guys to be at, and it does kind of go against your compliance if you're not attending these sessions. So please make every effort to attend these sessions. But we are recording them, and we'll be sending them out at the end of the week with Erica's weekly email. So if you were not able to attend this session and you have to do it later, then please make sure that you still sign in and out, and use that QR code to sign in and out so that we can see that you did watch the videos and that you did participate in the sessions. All right. Have a great week, and we will see you guys next Monday. I'm going to stop the recording now.